Chapter 1. Nighttime Tokyo Harbor. In a dilapidated warehouse near the coast, the mottled iron walls absorbed the smell of the sea and looked particularly gloomy. And a slim figure was sitting on a small chair with her hands tied behind her back and her mouth sealed with tape. Looking closely, it was a beautiful girl who was at most 16 or 17 years old. Even in such a gloomy environment, the girl's back was still straight, and her face covered by a white cloth was very calm. In addition to the girl in the warehouse, there were a few men in suits who didn't look like good people. They wore a uniform black suit and wore sunglasses in the dim room. The words, "I'm a bad guy," were almost written on their faces. And behind the men in suits on a recliner, there was a young man with yellow hair and a fierce face lying on it. Ugh! What happened to me? In the damp sea breeze, Ryuto Kiryu sat up from the recliner. Originally, the young man was reading a novel at home, but after falling asleep, he woke up in this strange environment. Gloomy warehouse, damp and stinky air, men in suits with unkind faces. And, not far away, there was a girl tied to a chair. From an objective point of view, this situation was very much like a sensational kidnapping case. Young Master Ryuto? What happened to you? Are you not feeling well? Seeing Ryuto sit up from the recliner, the obviously different long-haired man in a suit quickly came over and asked. From this point of view, Ryuto's role should be the ruler of this warehouse. Therefore, the mastermind behind this kidnapping case could very well be me. When he realized this, Ryuto, who had just transmigrated, was dumbfounded. People transmigrated, and so did I. People transmigrated and became prisoners. Then they entered the sea and soared into the sky. But what kind of luck is this when it comes to me? I'm a kidnapper when I come in. Especially when he picked up the phone and used it as a mirror. When he saw his yellow hair and handsome but fierce face, he was even more dumbfounded. After transmigrating, Ryuto wasn't ugly. He could even be said to be handsome and youthful. He was the type that rich women liked. But the problem was that his handsomeness was ruined by his terrible temperament and his low-quality dyed yellow hair, making him look like a hooligan on the streets. I, with dyed blonde hair and a few black clothes and sunglasses, was kidnapping young girls. In this situation, if he succeeded, he would be in jail. If he failed, he would be in jail. He couldn't continue writing the former, and he couldn't continue living the latter. Either way, he would be unlucky. Wait, I don't want to be a bad person, bastard. How can a good student like me be a kidnapper? Seeing Ryuto standing there in a daze, the long-haired man in the suit added, "Young Master Ryuto? Are you all right?" Where is this place? Who are you?" When Long-do heard this, he covered his face with his hands and pretended to be sleepy. "This is the warehouse in Area C of Tokyo Bay. I'm your assistant, Yamamoto." "Oh, then what are we doing here?" "According to your instructions, I've kidnapped Miss Kanzaki here. I'm waiting for you to threaten her into submission and make her your wife." "Haha, very good." When he heard Yamamoto's neat answer, Ryuto's mouth arced up into a cold smile. Of course, it wasn't that he wanted to act cool. Perhaps the original owner of his body had acted cool too much. His muscles had gotten used to this kind of action and would subconsciously act cool. But after hearing Yamamoto's words, Ryuto also understood what kind of world he was in. Miss Kanzaki, young Master Ryuto. These names all came from a dating game called Crimson Battle 2, No Survivors. There were a total of 3 main female leads in the game, and each of them was a beauty that could topple countries. The first female lead was Kamiyoshi's daughter, Colored Glaze Kanzaki. Of course, if there were good people in the game, there would also be villains. In the early stages of the game, the main villain was the young master of the Kyoto Group's Rulon Group, Ryuto Kiryu. "That's right, it's me." Long-do raised his head with an arrogant look on his face, as if he was about to make an appearance. This character was arrogant and domineering in the game, and he would do anything by fair means or foul. After he failed to woo the first female lead, Colored Glaze Kanzaki, he attempted to kidnap her and force her to submit. However, this kidnapping plan was destined to fail. After all, Kamiyoshi was one of the 3 major families in Tokyo, and they were incredibly powerful. Thus, it didn't take long for Kamiyoshi's guards to find the warehouse, beat Ryuto half to death, and then tossed him into the sea to feed the fishes. Wait, isn't that right now? Suddenly, Ryudo woke up from his memories and looked around at the eerie surroundings. In the old warehouse by the sea, there was Kanzaki's daughter who was tied up. There was also this villain young master, who was about to be found by her family's guards and tossed into the sea to feed the fishes. Ha. Ryudo couldn't help but laugh as he thought of this. His sinister laughter echoed throughout the warehouse. When the suited men around him heard his laughter, they couldn't help but feel respect for their young master. As expected of their young master, he was still able to laugh so easily in such a situation. However, only Ryudo knew that he wasn't relaxed at all. He was clearly scared to death. Phew, calm down, don't panic. A few seconds later, Longdo quickly reached out and patted his face. At the same time, he took out his phone from his pocket. The time displayed on his cell phone was exactly 11:44 p.m., an extremely auspicious number. Not only that, Ryudo's cell phone's background was still Night Dew Death Bitter and Death Bitter Disciple, which were the Chinese characters for death. Based on his understanding of the game, Kanzaki's daughter should be rescued around 12:30 p.m. In other words, there were still about 45 minutes before Kamiyoshi's guards would find this place. I have to save myself. How can I go and take advantage of the fishes right after I transmigrated here? That would be too unlucky. With this in mind, Ryudo immediately whispered to his assistant Yamamoto, "Yamamoto, immediately go and gather some fighters." Fighters? Young Master Ryudo, who do you intend to have them deal with? Have them put on masks and rush in, pretending that they're here to deal with the colored glaze. Pretending? Young Master, you mean to play the hero and save the damsel in distress? As the young master of the Rulong group, all of Ryudo's subordinates were his brothers. Yamamoto was a veteran who had been on the streets for more than 10 years, so he naturally knew what Seiji intended to do. That's right, play the hero and save the damsel in distress. Right now, this was the only way that Ryudo could think of to turn the situation around. He had to let the colored glaze know that someone wanted to take her life at this time. And the reason why he kidnapped her was actually to protect her safety. This way, Ryudo would be able to change from the brainless villain who kidnapped Kanzaki to the dark hero who was willing to commit crimes to protect Kanzaki. This was also the only way that Ryudo could think of to get out of this dangerous situation. After all, it was already a fact that he had kidnapped Colored Glaze. Even if he let her go now, he wouldn't be able to escape punishment. Since he had already committed a crime, all Kanzaki had to do was report it to the police. The best that could happen to Ryudo would be that he would be sent to prison to pick up soap. The most important thing was that Kamiyoshi definitely wouldn't let him go. Kamiyoshi was one of the most powerful families in Tokyo. It would be strange if Kamiyoshi let him go. Hence, only by making the Colored Glaze give up on pursuing the matter would Ryudo be able to get through this dangerous situation safely. However, just as Yamamoto was about to leave, Ryudo suddenly remembered something. He added, "Oh right. Remember to make those hooligans admit that they're from the Heavenly Eye group." In reality, there were indeed people who wanted to assassinate Colored Glaze in the game. This was a fact. The darkness that could be seen everywhere was the Heavenly Eye group, an evil organization that committed all sorts of crimes. If Ryudo was just a small villain in the background, then the Heavenly Eye group was the real villain. Or rather, the group's president, Heavenly Eye Iam, was the real villain. There was a saying among the players of this game. Behind all the crimes, there's definitely Iam, Sama's shadow. Hence, since he had to find someone to blame, he might as well blame it on the Heavenly Eye group. After all, according to what Ryudo knew, they weren't clean to begin with. In fact, they were as black as coal. Tion, Heavenly Eye group? Young Master Ryudo, are you serious? However, when he heard his young master's order, Yamamoto's eyes flashed, and he couldn't help but gulp. That's right. They're not good people anyway. Just do it. In the original plot of the game, Ryudo's Rulong group and Iam's Heavenly Eye group were two parallel lines that intersected. These two forces had no connection at all. At least, according to what Ryudo knew, There was no connection. Hence, Ryudo dared to make someone else take the blame. After all, I the Great Witch, had never done anything good. Yes. Seeing that his young master was insistent, Yamamoto nodded and quickly left the warehouse. However, as he walked towards an empty street in the distance, he dialed a hidden number. Yamamoto, do you have something to report? 10 seconds later, the call connected, and a young woman's voice came from the other end. Even though it had been converted into an electrical signal, the sound still sounded very unique, different from the clear and melodious voice of a normal woman. Although the voice on the phone was young, it gave off a feeling as deep as the Drake Strait. Hence, when he heard her voice, it was like listening to the murmurs from the abyss on a night when the moon was as deep as water. The deep feeling was like it could swallow a person's soul and flesh and sink them to the bottom of the abyss that couldn't see the light of day. Master Sama, I do have something to report. That little devil seems to be restless. After taking a deep breath, Yamamoto told the real owner on the other end of the phone all the instructions he had heard before. Chapter 2. Oh, I see. After listening to Yamamoto, the undercover agent in the Rulon group, that she arranged to spy on Ryudo Kiryu, the woman on the other side of the phone nodded slightly. Sama, what should I do next? Contact advisor Sakata and get someone to kill him. Yes, then I won't bother you anymore. Beep. After hanging up, the woman on the other side of the phone showed an intriguing expression. Ryudo Kiryu, the advisor of the Rulon group, already secretly helped you kidnap the colored glaze. Why can't you just kill her? I gave you one last chance to have fun before you die, but you can't even grasp it. What a piece of trash. I originally wanted to use Kamiyoshi's power to get rid of you, but it doesn't matter who kills you. It doesn't matter. When she thought about the news that Kyoto young master kidnaps rich lady, both dead in warehouse, the woman couldn't help but laugh wildly in excitement. Ah, right. I forgot to ask that pig Yamamoto to film Ryudo's miserable state before he died. But he should know. If he doesn't, I'll feed him to the dogs when I come back. Very good, it's decided. Regardless of whether it was the miserable state of the eldest young master of the dragon group, with snot and tears before he died, or Yamamoto's miserable state when he was bitten by a group of Tibetan mastiffs that were starving for 3 days. For the woman, it was the perfect dish to go with alcohol. As a result, the deep laughter echoed in the dark room, exuding a terrifying atmosphere similar to that of a horror movie. And in the warehouse, Ryudo was still feeling proud of his strategy of driving the tiger to devour the wolf. Under the dumbfounded gaze of the two men in black, he put his right hand on his forehead, slightly bowed, and posed as a thinker. I'm too smart. How did I think of throwing the blame on the world's biggest black screen? As if he was impressed by his intelligence, Ryudo showed a devilish smile that he thought was handsome. Just then Yamamoto, who finished 2 phone calls, walked in and whispered to him, Young Master Ryudo, it's done. Take the men in black and wait at the door. Do you know what to do when someone comes? As Longdo spoke, he gave Yamamoto a look that said, You know what I mean. Understood. Pretend to go to the bathroom, but in fact let them in. Smart, go out. I'm smart, but you're not. After shaking his head, Yamamoto took the 2 men in black and opened the door and walked out. Farewell, Tongxing Longdo. I won't be able to see your stupid face again. Before leaving, Yamamoto took one last look at the warehouse and showed a proud smile. Then his figure disappeared into the night. He planned to find a place to smoke a few cigarettes and come back to collect Ryudo's corpse. But right now, Ryudo didn't have any awareness of the impending danger. Instead, he was sitting on a recliner and enjoying a rare rest. He crossed his legs and put his hands on his head, as if he was on vacation. All I have to do is wait. Wait for the group of assassins to come. Then I'll save Miss Kanzaki from their hands. Perfect. After looking at the beautiful figure sitting on a recliner, Ryudo couldn't help but show a warm and cold smile. In the game, his favorite character was the first female lead, Kanzaki Colored Glaze. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also quite smart. She had nicknames like Wulong Colored Glaze, and Kanzaki Young Phoenix. Meanwhile, the Kanzaki family was a family of witches who served the gods. They had a high status, and the highest title of witches in history, Sakuraji, had always come from this family. Having grown up in such a family, the colored glaze had the courage to remain calm no matter what the situation was. She also had an extraordinary aura of a leader. She could easily make others trust her and follow her. Her prominent family background and excellent personal abilities made this young lady one of the main forces to deal with the Heavenly Eye group in the later stages of the game. She was also the female lead with the most scenes. Right, since this isn't a game world, then there shouldn't be a male lead here, right? Ryuto vaguely remembered that the male lead in this game had a custom identity. From his name, background, and personality, he could freely choose anything. Back then, when the game company advertised this game, they even intentionally used immersive gameplay as a selling point, meaning that it was as if they had entered the game themselves. Now that Ryuto had truly entered the game world, then the player in this world should be himself. There shouldn't be a second male lead. If that's the case, I can also develop a relationship with the 3 female leads. Thinking of this, Ryuto's gaze towards the colored glaze became gentler, although in reality, it was more ferocious. However, with this unlucky guy's identity as a villain after transmigrating, it would be quite difficult for him to develop a relationship with the female lead. After all, Ryuto Kiryo's position could only be described as detestable. As the young master of the extreme Dao organization Rulong Group, his background wasn't clean to begin with. Moreover, he was arrogant, despotic, and did all sorts of bad things. He was simply scum. This kind of scum with a negative reputation value, and a bunch of enemies. Which normal girl would be with him? Speaking of which, I'm a transmigrator, right? Shouldn't transmigrators have some sort of system to help me reduce the difficulty? While waiting for time to pass, Ryuto couldn't help but think. Beep 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 beep. La 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 la. Just as the word system appeared in Ryuto's mind, a strange sound effect suddenly rang in his head. What's going on? Beep. Detected that a low-level transmigrator is hoping for a pie in the sky. Pay-to-win fate-changing system has officially been activated. Then this strange sound effect rang in Ryuto's mind, and it seemed to be full of sarcasm. After that, a huge electronic screen floated in midair and suddenly appeared before his eyes. On this translucent electronic screen was written the words, Pay-to-win fate-changing system. These 6 words made one speechless. Pay-to-win fate-changing system description. Gives a dreamlike chance to a new life to those who wish to turn over a new leaf, but don't have the ability to do so. The system's motto is, use money to create happiness. Play with your coins if you don't have money. If you don't have money, please don't open the system page, you damned pauper. Who's the scum of society, you bastard? What the hell is playing with your coins? What's a damned pauper? This era is all about civilization and harmony. Be careful that the river crab mythological beast doesn't break your system's skull. If it wasn't for the fact that Miss Kanzaki was still in the warehouse, Ryuto would have definitely wanted to give this damned system a moral lesson. Forget it, let's see what this pay-to-win fate-changing system is. Although Ryuto felt like he was going to be scammed every time he opened this system, he still helplessly opened it. After opening the system's main interface, the first thing that appeared was a row of character interfaces. Name: Ryuto Kiryoichi, 16 stats. Wisdom LV1, Vitality LV2, Courage LV3, Insight LV1, Charm LV1 Title: Extreme Young Master. Charm decreases by 1 level, Courage increases by 1 level. Equipment: None. Total assets: 12,658,550 earned right now. Ryuto's basic interface was roughly like this. There was also a basic introduction below his stats. LV1. Human Scraps LV2. Excellent Passer LV3. Professional Expert LV4. International Warrior LV5. Extreme Superman. After reading these introductions, Ryuto's expression froze. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Alright, as expected of a minor antagonist in the early stages of the game, my stats are really weak. Although his courage was high enough, what was the use of just having courage? His other stats had to be able to keep up as well. The problem was that Ryudo had no charm, no insight, and no brains. His constitution was only at the level of an excellent passerby. He was basically useless. By the way, wasn't this system called the pay-to-win fate-changing system? Could it be that relying on pay-to-win? I'm sorry, this white cloth is a bit tight. Could you help me loosen it? Just as Ryudo was wondering whether or not this stupid system could help him, the girl's stern voice suddenly sounded from nearby. Even though she was tied up and sitting on a chair, this Kanzaki girl's tone still sounded like she was sitting on a jade throne. This was also the first time that colored glaze Kanzaki had spoken since she was kidnapped. That was because she truly didn't understand what sort of ridiculous thing was happening in this warehouse. Actually, not only did colored glaze not know what was going on, even Ryudo didn't know, or perhaps he thought that he knew. As for the Kamiyoshi girl who was kidnapped not long ago, colored glaze Kanzaki, although the current situation was rather troublesome, she had never given up on saving herself. Her hands, which were tied behind her back, appeared to be calmly placed behind her back. However, she was actually using a protrusion from the corner of the chair to slowly grind away at the adhesive tape binding her wrists. By now, the adhesive tape on colored glaze's wrists was almost completely worn off. She only needed to exert a little bit of strength to break free. But even if she broke free of the adhesive tape, she wouldn't be able to escape from this room. Colored glaze was well aware of this. After all, apart from that scumbag Ryudo Kiryu, there seemed to be a few other black-clothed people in and out of this room. These black-clothed people were all carefully selected elite fighters. With just a weak girl like colored glaze, the chances of her escaping were absolutely zero. However, just as colored glaze was thinking about how to escape, the warehouse suddenly became incredibly quiet. This silence was definitely abnormal. It felt as if a storm was brewing. Colored glaze, who had been trying her best to listen to everyone else's conversation, immediately noticed this change. She even spoke for the first time. That was why colored glaze didn't really think that the white cloth was too tight. She just wanted to find out what was happening in the room. However, Ryudo instantly became spirited when he heard her words. Right, since I'm going to pretend to save her, wouldn't it be better to communicate with this girl first? And so, Ryudo walked up to colored glaze and completely removed the white cloth that had been covering her eyes. Chapter 3. The moment the white cloth fell, what appeared in Long Do's eyes was a small face with the charm of a classic beauty. Colored glaze's face was more suitable to be described as elegant than gorgeous. Her black hair cascaded down to her slender waist like a waterfall, making her look like an ancient princess who had just descended to the mortal world. Apart from her natural beauty, what left an even deeper impression was her imposing figure, as well as the cold aura that seemed to emanate from her heart. This guy isn't going to mess around, is he? Colored glaze's expression didn't change when she saw Ryudo Kiryu suddenly walk over and pull down the white cloth covering her face, but she was secretly worried. Ryudo seemed to understand what colored glaze was worried about as he smiled gently and said, "Relax, I don't intend to do anything to you. You can leave in a moment." While saying this, Ryudo opened up his cell phone's recording system and began recording their conversation. This way, as long as colored glaze said that she wouldn't pursue him, he could use this to prove that he wasn't lying. "What are you trying to do now?" But in colored glaze's eyes, this pervert smile was incredibly sly and cold, just like a venomous snake that was baring its fangs. But in reality, Ryudo really was trying to show a gentle smile. Unfortunately, perhaps his body's previous owner had smiled too much, causing his muscles to become rigid. No matter how he smiled, he still looked like a pervert. "What a joke, you kidnapped me and then said that you didn't intend to do anything to me. How could that be? I'd be an idiot if I believed you. I'm not trying to do anything. You can leave in a moment, under the condition that you're safe." But since he had decided to put on a big show in front of the Kanzaki scion, Ryudo continued to act sincere. "Under the condition that I'm safe? What do you mean?" "Actually, I received a tip that someone is planning to do something to you tonight." "Aren't you the one who's planning to do something to me?" No, I only kidnapped you so that your life wouldn't be in danger. Although he knew that his words sounded stupid, Ryudo still spoke in a sincere tone. Of course, from a logical point of view, his words made no sense at all. Only an idiot would believe him. You, a young master of the extreme Dao realm, kidnapped me because he was worried about my safety? Who are you trying to fool? However, after Luli heard this and thought for a few seconds, she immediately understood what he meant. Why would this guy suddenly say something like that to me? Could it be? Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she saw Ryudo's right hand hidden behind his back. Ptahaha. After realizing this, Colored Glaze couldn't help but laugh. Her laughter was as pleasant as a silver bell, but unfortunately, it didn't carry any good intentions. What are you laughing at? Ahem, it's nothing. I just didn't expect you to be such a nice person. After glancing at the young master of the Extreme Dao organization, Rulong Group, Colored Glaze praised him. Really? Actually, I've always been nice. You just didn't notice. After being praised by his favorite Colored Glaze, Ryudo immediately felt energized. The smile on his face became even more sinister. Of course, what made him happy was that Colored Glaze's attitude towards him seemed to be improving. This meant that there was a chance for her to give up on pursuing the matter. And so, Ryudo struck while the iron was hot and started chatting with Colored Glaze. The two of them seemed to treat this warehouse filled with the smell of the sea as a classroom, as they chatted happily. However, in Colored Glaze's heart, she had reduced Ryudo from a scumbag idiot to a scumbag idiot. Although Ryudo felt that Colored Glaze was easy to talk to, he forgot that she was the famous Hidden Dragon Phoenix young lady. Therefore, Colored Glaze had more or less figured out his current thoughts and methods. From the change in Long Do's attitude, it was obvious that this extreme Dao young master was regretting his actions after kidnapping Long Do. After all, behind him was the Kamiyoshi family, which had occupied an important position in Tokyo for many years. It wouldn't be so easy to get rid of them. And in a situation where the kidnapping was already a fact, the only thing that could let Ryudo off the hook was Colored Glaze's attitude. Only if Colored Glaze personally denied that the kidnapping had happened could this idiot be let off the hook. So he seemed to have thought of such a rotten idea. He pretended to be like, I kidnapped you to save you. If Colored Glaze wasn't mistaken, in a moment, someone would come in to deal with her. Then, Ryudo would perform the old-fashioned hero saving the damsel in distress. The girl who was saved from the brink of death would obviously be grateful. In this situation, she would even forget about her previous kidnapping and treat Ryudo as her savior. Unfortunately, this plan was too crude. Normal high school girls might fall for it, but Colored Glaze definitely wouldn't. In a situation where she saw through everything, Colored Glaze only needed to pretend to be polite and talk a few words to fool this idiot, so that he wouldn't do something irrational. After she was rescued, she would turn around and accuse Ryudo of kidnapping her, and everything would be over. However, while Colored Glaze pretended to chat with the kidnapper, her ears that were covered by her hair moved slightly, as if she heard something. At the same time, Ryudo also heard a flurry of footsteps coming from the gate not far away. Seems like they're already here. My magnificent performance is about to begin. Suddenly, Ryudo secretly smiled and said to Colored Glaze seriously, Someone's coming. Don't move around here. I'll go over and observe. Aha, go. I'll rely on you to protect me, Ryudo-kun. Colored Glaze also showed a worried expression, but in her heart, she was already laughing like a flower. Act as much as you can. If it wasn't for the people you called over, they would have seen a ghost. Thus, Colored Glaze secretly smiled as she watched Ryudo straighten his back and walk towards the rusty gate of the warehouse not far away. Boom! But before Ryudo could take a few steps, a loud bang came from the other side. A sneaker kicked out, and the rusty gate of the warehouse was directly kicked open by the uninvited guests. This, as expected of a professional, his acting was quite good. Under Long Do's admiring gaze, 3 young men with animal masks on their heads walked in. They had dressed themselves up to look like the Dark Ops. They were holding a machete, a crowbar, and a taser in their hands. They looked like they had done their homework and acted very realistically. Hey, Who are you people? Save me. Colored Glaze couldn't help but shout when she saw how the three of them were dressed, but the mockery in her eyes became even more obvious. No matter how professionally dressed they were, a fake assassin would always be a fake assassin. They would never become a real assassin. Colored Glaze was well aware of this fact, and Ryuto was naturally even more aware of it. And so he walked towards the three of them while saying, "Who are you people? Do you want to do something to Kanzaki-san, Just as Long Do was about to walk in that direction without any warning, a voice rang out. The dog-masked man standing at the front with a machete raised his weapon and unhesitatingly swung it towards young Master Toshio's head. Everything was an act, so it was impossible for them to actually use their weapons to attack. That's right, everything was supposed to be an act. But why? Why was the floor tilted? Why was it standing right in front of him? When Ryuto was struck in the head by the machete, and his head fell to the floor like a fountain, his mind was filled with great confusion. Hey, what's going on? Hey, Ryuto Kiryu, this is... Just as Ryuto's vision was rapidly becoming blurry, and his consciousness was fading, he seemed to hear Colored Glaze's incredulous voice. At the same time, he also heard his system's mechanical voice that sounded like it was mocking him. Detected that the host is on the verge of death. Activating emergency rescue plan. Using 1 million credits to erase the fact that the host is dead. Beep 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 beep. Erase successful. Before Ryuto could react, he once again appeared in the same storeroom as before. He was still sitting on the familiar recliner, and the familiar black-clothed people were still standing next to him. It was as if the terrifying scene just now had never happened. Chapter 4. How should he put it? For Ryuto, when he realized that he was lying on the recliner, he felt as if he had just had a dream. It was as if he had just woken up from a dream. He didn't dare to move for a long time. It was still the same damp warehouse. There were several suits around him. Not far away, Kanzaki Colored Glaze was tied to a chair. But now when Ryuto saw this scene, his mood was completely different from before. What's going on? Didn't I die? How did I come back to life? Also, if I didn't hear wrong, that Krypton Fate Reversal System said that it had activated some sort of emergency rescue plan? That plan seems to be to spend $1 million to erase the fact that I'm dead? Could it be? Ryuto immediately opened up that damned system and carefully looked at his stats. Name: Ryuto Kiryuich, 16 stats. Intelligence LV1, Constitution LV2, Courage LV3, Insight LV1, Charisma LV1 title. Extreme Young Master, Charisma decreased by 1 level, Courage increased by 1 level, Equipment, none. Total assets, $11,658,550 at a glance. Most of the stats were exactly the same as before. The only difference was that in the total assets column, it had changed from 12 million to 11 million. So that's how it is. This emergency rescue plan is just like loading a file. But since it costs 1 million every time, it's worth it. After understanding the reason why he was alive, Ryuto couldn't help but grit his teeth, but he still pretended to be asleep on the recliner. No matter what, $1 million in exchange for a chance to load a file was a blessing in disguise. Otherwise, Ryuto's life and this world would have been completely over the instant he was killed. But even though he had reloaded the file and returned to the starting point, he still had to figure out what had happened before. While lying on the recliner, Ryuto's brain started working rapidly. I clearly told Yamamoto to arrange for a group of people to pretend to be assassins to deal with the Colored Glaze. In reality, I was supposed to be the hero saving the damsel in distress. But the assassins arranged for me killed me right away. What's the reason for this? First of all, this so-called assassin incident obviously didn't exist in the game. The only reason this incident occurred was because Ryuto wanted to be the hero saving the damsel in distress. In other words, if he didn't do this, these 3 assassins wouldn't have appeared. Judging from this point of view, no one in this world would arrange for assassins to kill him or the Colored Glaze at this time. It was only because of that sudden order that caused this chain reaction. In Longdo's opinion, there were 2 reasons for this chain reaction. First, there was someone in his organization, the Dragon Group, who wanted to kill him. Then the assassins to kill Ryudo's. Second, there were people from other organizations who wanted to kill him. So, they replaced the assassins, called by Yamamoto, with the real assassins and killed Ryudo's. But whether it was internal or external enemies, what really surprised Ryudo was that the 3 assassins came too quickly. From the time Ryudo asked Yamamoto to find the assassins until the assassins arrived, only 10 minutes had passed. How did the people who want to kill me know about this in such a short time? Wait, could it be Yamamoto? Suddenly, Ryudo couldn't help but frown slightly as he remembered the story of this character in the game. When Yamamoto first appeared, he was Ryudo's assistant and helped him do a lot of bad things. But when Ryudo was thrown to feed the fish, Yamamoto jumped to the Heavenly Eye group and became the pawn of the villain, Heavenly Eye Am. Ryudo didn't think much about such a job hopping. After all, Ryudo was gone at that time. It was logical for Yamamoto to jump to the new boss. But thinking about it carefully, what if it wasn't job hopping? What if Yamamoto had always been related to Iam? In the middle and later stages of the game, Colored Glaze had such a conversation with the protagonist. The hands of the Heavenly Eye group have reached out to every corner, especially Dongjing, which is their nest. They have people in almost every major force. From this point of view, it was reasonable for the Heavenly Eye group to arrange a pawn in the Rulong group. And this informant was likely to be around Ryudo, who was the young master. For example, Yamamoto. Suddenly, Long Do opened his eyes slightly and looked at the man who was leaning against the wall and smoking not far away. Yamamoto was in his 30s and had been in the underworld for more than 10 years. He could be considered an elder in the Rulong group. This person used to follow Sakata, one of the 3 consultants of the Rulong group. He was Sakata's loyal subordinate. With the leader Kiryu Kazuma in prison for a long time, the Rulong group was now controlled by the consultant group headed by Sakata. Yamamoto was transferred by Sakata to be the young master's assistant. Wait, from this point of view, could it be that Yamamoto was the middleman between Sakata and the Heavenly Eye group? Is Sakata also a mole? Immediately, Ryudo thought of the middle-aged uncle who always had a smile on his face and looked very cunning. Although the Rulong group basically didn't have any scenes in the later stages of the game, Heavenly Eye Iam shouldn't have let go of such a large organization. Could it be that the woman had already taken control of the Rulong group after the leader went to prison and the young master died, but didn't show it in the game? Thinking of this, Ryudo couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. He seemed to feel the bottomless malice hidden under the surface of this world. Heavenly Eye Iam was extremely cruel. She killed without batting an eye. She especially liked to record the miserable state of others before they died for her collection. If this kind of real villain knew that Ryudo wanted to push the blame to her, it was natural that he would have his head blown off on the spot. So that's how it is. When I said the words Heavenly Eye Group to Yamamoto, I might have already walked into a dead end. Although that was what he thought, Ryudo still wanted to confirm it again. Yamamoto, come here. So Ryudo laid on the recliner and called Yamamoto to his side. Young master, what are your orders? Immediately mobilize a few thugs. Later, let them wear masks and rush in and pretend that they want to deal with the Colored Glaze. Put on an act. Young master, you mean you want to be a hero and save the damsel in distress? Although he had previous experience, Ryudo continued to say to Yamamoto, remember to let those thugs admit that they are from the Heavenly Eye Group. Tion. Heavenly Eye Group? Young Master Ryudo, are you serious? However, when he heard the young master's order, Yamamoto's eyes flickered. And this flicker was completely seen by Ryudo, who was carefully watching him. Damn, something is wrong with you. Looking at Yamamoto's figure that went out to make a call, Ryudo sneered and turned to look at the other 2 men in black in the room. These 2 men in black were Yamamoto's subordinates and also members of the Rulong group. But the problem was whether they followed Yamamoto or the Rulong group. If it was the latter, Ryudo could command them, but not the former. Not long after, Yamamoto opened the door and walked in. He whispered to Ryudo, Young Master Ryudo, the matter is done. Aha, very good. Then I will take the others out first. You don't have to go out. Just stay here and help me look after the colored glaze. Huh. This isn't good, right? When he heard Ryudo's request, Yamamoto frowned slightly with an awkward expression on his face. Chapter 5. In the original plan, Yamamoto was supposed to bring the two black-robed men outside and let Ryudo and the colored glaze have some alone time in the warehouse. This was the only way to provide the necessary conditions for Ryudo to protect the colored glaze by himself. However, Ryudo didn't intend to do that. Instead, he had Yamamoto and the two black-robed men stay behind. The reason why he had died earlier was mainly because the three real assassins had recklessly barged into the warehouse. Yamamoto and the two black-robed men, who were protecting the young master, had gone off to some unknown place and weren't of any use. Then what about this time? Ryudo had everyone stay behind. This way, he would be able to see many things. For example, whether or not the three assassins were in cahoots with Yamamoto. Also, whether or not the two black-robed men were the same as Yamamoto, the underlings of the Heavenly Eye group. If they worked together to protect Ryudo, then things would be simple. With someone protecting him, there was a high chance that nothing would happen. If they were in cahoots with the enemy, then things would be even simpler. Take the 1 million, and I'll take it as my loss. We'll do it again next time. Under Ryudo's forceful demand, Yamamoto's expression became rather ugly. However, he still sighed slightly and said to the young master, "Yes, then we'll protect the colored glaze lady well. Young master, you go deal with the assassins." "That's right. That's how it should be. You know quite well." After standing up, Ryudo patted Yamamoto's shoulder and gave him a devilish smile. "Damn it, you little brat." When he turned around and led the black-robed men to the inner room where the colored glaze was, Yamamoto couldn't help but grit his teeth. "I didn't want to do this. I have no choice. You forced me. The two of you keep an eye on this lady. Don't let your guard down." "Yes." As Yamamoto gave the order to the two black-clothed men, the two of them stood on either side of Kamitani to protect colored glaze. As for Yamamoto, after giving the order, he quietly went to the corner in the deepest part of the room. This corner of the wall was the place with the widest field of vision. From there, he could see the backs of Ryudo and the two men in black. When the new faction was formed, the sudden change startled colored glaze. "What's going on? Why do they have to watch over me so closely? Could it be that something had happened? Don't tell me." She noticed that I was rubbing the tape on my back. Colored glaze felt a chill in her heart. She tried her best to shrink back to avoid exposing her hands that were tied behind her back. In this situation, colored glaze did not dare to speak casually, while Ryudo and Yamamoto were not in the mood to talk. And so, the storeroom quickly fell silent as time passed by. 10 minutes later, a few familiar footsteps could be heard running towards them. "They're here. Are the three assassins finally here?" Asterisk boom. Asterisk, there was a loud explosion that they had never heard before. The rusty door to the storeroom was kicked open by the uninvited guests. 3 assassins wearing animal masks and wielding a machete, crowbar, and taser rushed in. "Who goes there?" But unlike last time, the 2 black-clothed men in the room immediately shouted angrily and took out daggers from their pockets. As a member of the extreme Dao society, it was quite normal for them to carry daggers with them. And these daggers, which usually seemed so terrifying, now seemed so warm in Ryudo's eyes. At the same time, when the 3 assassins broke into the storeroom and saw that there were so many people standing inside, they were astonished. "What's going on? Didn't they say that there were only 2 targets, 1 male and 1 female? Why are there so many extra people?" There was a huge difference between what they saw and the information they had received. This caused the 3 assassins to become quite confused. Ryudo couldn't help but nod when he noticed that the 3 assassins had stopped moving. "Very good. They're already starting to become confused. What will you do next, Yamamoto?" Chirp. Chirp chirp. Just as Ryudo turned around to see what Yamamoto was planning to do, a sharp explosion suddenly sounded from that direction. Fresh blood sprayed through the air, and landed on Kenzaki-colored glaze, who was tied to a stool. "This is blood?" The compressed, ear-piercing explosion, the smell of blood in the air, and the warmth on his body. With so many things mixed together, the blindfolded colored glaze finally understood what was happening around him. Ryudo turned around and glared angrily at the two black-clothed men, who had been shot in the back, collapsed to the ground at the same time. "Honestly, it's not good to not follow the script. You actually forced me to use this thing." Tap, tap, tap. Yamamoto, who was holding a pistol equipped with a silencer, walked forward with a slight sound of leather shoes. He sighed. He had no intention of killing these two Rulon Group subordinates who had followed him for so many years. But he had no choice now. These two people didn't know about Sakata-sama's plan, and he couldn't be sure that they were trustworthy. Yamamoto wouldn't let them leave. "Master Ryudo, why won't you let us leave? That way 2 fewer people would have died." The next moment, Yamamoto pointed the gun at Colored Glaze's head without hesitation. "Wait! Don't!" When Ryudo sensed that Yamamoto wanted to do something, he yelled at him and rushed over. "I can't. Run!" The moment the gun was pointed at his head, Colored Glaze quickly tore off the tape in his hands and tried to stand up and run. Chirp! But before Colored Glaze could take a step, Yamamoto had already pulled the trigger. At such a close distance, she was shot in the head. The eldest daughter of the Kanzaki family didn't even feel the pain before she lost consciousness on the spot. "Yamamoto, *CK your ancestors." When he saw his favorite heroine lying on the ground with her head covered in blood, Ryudo only felt his blood boiling, and his tone became murderous. Chirp! But then another gunshot rang out. Yamamoto casually shot Long Do, who was pouncing towards him. After being shot in the chest, Ryudo only felt that all the strength in his body was drained, and his body fell limply to the ground. So this is what it feels like to be shot. After experiencing a feeling that most ordinary people would never have the opportunity to experience in their lives. Ryudo, who fell to the ground, used the last of his strength to raise his hand and made an international gesture to Yamamoto. "Ignorant guy, you dare to provoke me even before you die. Hehe, I'm not just going to provoke you. I'm also going to make you die a horrible death." Before his consciousness disappeared, Ryudo tried his best to show a joyful smile. "You want me to die a horrible death? If you like posing so much, then record your temporary appearance and send it to that person and Sakata-sama." Yamamoto smiled when he heard this. Then, he took out his phone and took a picture of Long Do's dying face. Sure enough, this guy and Sakata-sama are very good. It was at this moment that Ryudo's life came to an end, and he heard the familiar voice again. Detected that the host is on the verge of death, an emergency rescue plan will be initiated, and the fact of death will be erased by spending 1 million. Beep 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 beep, erase successful. The next moment, everything returned to normal. Ryudo appeared alive in this small warehouse again. Hee hee ha 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 ha. Looking at Yamamoto, who was still smoking not far away, Ryudo couldn't help but laugh, and then his eyes emitted a murderous light. Chapter 6. The moment Ryudo appeared in this warehouse for the 3rd time, he couldn't help but laugh. "Young master, you're awake, why are you laughing so happily?" When he heard the laughter, Yamamoto, who was leaning on the side smoking, immediately extinguished the cigarette and walked over. Ryudo looked at the familiar face getting closer and closer, and the smile on his face became more and more sinister. Hehe, probably because I had a good dream. A good dream is a good sign. It means something good will happen. Yamamoto pretended to smile, and his weather-beaten face showed an expression like he was teasing a child. "Indeed, something good will happen in a while, I promise." And Ryudo looked at the face that was deeply engraved in his memory not long ago, and pinched the armrest of the recliner hard. Because if he didn't do this, he might not be able to resist the urge to punch Yamamoto's nose. Of course, this was meaningless. After all, Yamamoto had a gun in his arms. If he really fought with him here, there was a high probability that he would be shot. Calm down. He must calm down and find a way out of this messy dead end. After lying back on the recliner, Ryudo began to think again. After the second resurrection, he fully understood what a terrifying demon's den he was in. From the beginning, this warehouse full of the smell of the sea was an execution ground for him, the young master of the Rulong group. So far, Ryudo knew that there were three forces that wanted his life. Kamiyoshi was enraged by the kidnapping of Milady, and the moment they rushed in, it would be the moment of Ryudo's death. Advisor Sakata was one of the designers of this scene. He was the one who suggested that Ryudo kidnap Colored Glaze, and even the executor was Yamamoto. Behind Sakata, there was Tenmu Ayam, the ultimate devil. Just like Sakata, she hoped that Ryudo would die here. Ryudo was the only descendant of the team leader of the Rulong group. Now that the team leader was in prison, he was the symbol of the family name Tongsheng. Therefore, other than Sakata, the other two consultants were on the side of Ryudo and his son. They were waiting for the young master to grow up, so that he could inherit the position of team leader. Therefore, as long as Ryudo died, the Rulong group would be completely dominated by Sakata, and the entire force would become Ayam's puppet. In other words, the ones who wanted to kill Ryudo were actually the three forces: Kamiyoshi, Rulong group, and Heavenly Eye group. Good lad. I'm stuck in a pincer attack situation the moment I enter. You really think too highly of me. After deeply understanding how troublesome this situation was, Ryudo carefully thought of a way to break out of this situation. It wasn't difficult to get out alive. He could escape by peeing. But if he did that, the Colored Glaze who stayed here would definitely be killed, and it wouldn't solve the fundamental problem. Since the two men in black weren't Ayam's lackeys, Ryudo only had to deal with Yamamoto. But there was another problem. Even if he dealt with Yamamoto and escaped with Colored Glaze, Ryudo's identity as the kidnapper would still be confirmed. The only way to survive was to let Colored Glaze know that this was all part of the Heavenly Eye group, as scheme and escape with her. To do so, two conditions had to be met. First, trigger Yamamoto to call Sakata or Ayam, and summon three assassins. Second, let Colored Glaze see the three assassins and know that they weren't acting. Then let Colored Glaze escape with her. The first condition was simple, but the second condition was difficult. After summoning the assassins, the enemy changed from one Yamamoto to four, and all four of them had weapons. Even if the two men in black that Ryudo could use had daggers, 2 daggers against a pistol, machete, crowbar, and taser, there was no chance of winning. Although I have the information, the methods I can use are a bit too little. The strength of both sides isn't proportional. After thinking for a while, Ryudo felt a headache coming on. The current situation was like two sides playing chess. The other side had artillery, carriages, and horses, while he only had 2 soldiers. How could he win? If he couldn't even cross the river, how could he fight? He might as well learn the French military salute. By the way, I was going to take a closer look at the Krypton Fate reversal system, but it seems like I was interrupted by Colored Glaze. Suddenly, Ryudo remembered that he seemed to be someone with a system. Although the system wasn't a good thing, sometimes he had to use it. When he quickly opened the panel of the Krypton Fate reversal system, Ryudo carefully looked at it and found something. For example, in the character attributes column, there was a small plus next to the 5 attributes. He curiously pressed the plus, and the system popped up a "Do you want to increase the level of your attributes?" prompt. Increase the level of my attributes? They're such a good thing. Originally, when he saw his Wisdom LV1, Physique LV2, Courage LV3, Insight LV1, Charm LV1 garbage attributes, Ryudo was very unhappy. But if he could increase the level through the system, it would be different. The difference between LV1 and LV2 attributes didn't mean much, but as long as he reached LV3, he would become a professional expert, which was equivalent to a qualitative change. If he had LV3 physique, Ryudo might be able to easily kill Yamamoto. However, the moment he clicked on yes, the system message that popped up next stunned him. Increasing from LV2 physique to LV3 physique requires 5 million. Confirm payment? The cost of increasing attributes is so expensive. Although Longdo had already guessed that all the services in the system had to be bought with money, the 5 million increment was too outrageous. After his second resurrection, he now had a total of $10,658,550 in his little treasury. Originally, he had 10 lives that he could use to tackle the problem. But if he increased the attributes, it was equivalent to losing 5 lives. The price was not small. But even so, Ryudo still pressed the confirm button. After all, the difference between LV2 physique, excellent passerby, and LV3 physique, professional expert, was still huge. It was much more important than a few lives. After he finished, Ryudo's total assets immediately became 5,658,550. And at the same time, his body underwent a huge change. He immediately felt as light as a swallow, as if he could do a dozen somersaults on the spot. At the same time, his body was filled with explosive power. Damn! It's like a completely different person from before. After feeling the benefits of the physique increase, Ryudo immediately had a new idea. How about I directly increase it to LV4 physique, international warrior? Then wouldn't I be able to kill all my enemies? With this thought, Ryudo pressed the plus next to his physique again. Increasing from LV3 physique to LV4 physique requires 50 million. If you don't have enough money, don't randomly choose, damn poor bastard. Damn, you're a super profiteer. When he saw the huge number, Ryudo almost couldn't help but shout on the spot. Chapter 7. Indeed, if he quickly increased the value of one attribute, he would be able to suppress everyone. But obviously, the system didn't plan to let him have such a good thing. After all, it was a profiteer. According to Ryudo's experiment, other than physique, the other 4 attributes only required 5 million to increase. Only physique, which had been increased once, required 50 million to increase it again, which was 10 times the cost. From this point of view, the cost of repeatedly increasing an attribute should be 10 times the cost of the previous one. From LV2 to LV3, it required 5 million. From LV3 to LV4, it required 50 million. From LV4 to LV5, it required 500 million. And this was the cost of physique at LV2. If it was increased from LV1, the cost would increase by 10 times, reaching a maximum of 5 billion. Damn, this is daylight robbery. Where am I going to get so much money to increase it? Even if Ryudo was the young master of the Rulon group, he didn't have such a large amount of money in his pocket. Having tens of millions was already very impressive. Hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars, didn't seem like something a normal person could take out. Whatever. There's no point in thinking about this. Anyway, the money can't be used recklessly. After letting out a sigh, Longdo looked at the remaining 5 million in his funds. Until now, he was still trapped in this small warehouse by the sea. Thinking about the future was unnecessary. Wait, what is this? Just as Ryudo was about to close the system page, he suddenly saw a small house icon under the amount of money. He clicked on the icon, and a level 2 page with the words Krypton Shopping Mall popped up. There was a line of words at the top of the page. The line was custom-made for you who like to play hooligan. Who likes to play hooligan? Bastard. If it wasn't for the fact that Ryudo urgently needed to unite all forces, he wouldn't even look at this Krypton Shopping Mall. But he didn't know until he looked. But he was shocked when he looked. The shopping mall was full of dazzling items. And some of the items were indeed very practical. Since it was a hooligan tool, then the things sold here were indeed very hooligan. For example, the hooligan taser that could electrocute people into eels was priced at 200,000 yuan. For example, the gangster's knuckle dusters that could increase the strength of the attack and were very hidden were priced at 150,000 yuan. For example, the rogue lockpicker that could open most keyholes was priced at 500,000 yuan. Frankly speaking, although the names of these things were very unpleasant, some of the effects of these things were quite practical. Considering that he was going to use force against Yamamoto later, it would be better to buy a taser or knuckle duster. What is this thing? Just as Ryudo was thinking of buying something to serve Yamamoto, his eyes caught the rogue bug in the corner of the mall. The rogue eavesdropping device looked like a sticker. As long as it was stuck on the other party's mobile phone or other communication device, it could eavesdrop on the conversation. The price of this rogue eavesdropping device was not cheap. The asking price was 500,000 yuan. But for the current Ryudo, this thing was extremely cost-effective. Before, he was still thinking about how to let Colored Glaze understand the current situation as soon as possible, so that it would be easier for her to cooperate with him. Now it seemed that he had found a way. After spending some money to buy the rogue bug and rogue taser, Ryudo's total assets decreased by another 700,000 yuan to around 4,950,000 yuan. Well, this was not even enough for 5 lives. But when he touched the 2 stickers and a stick that suddenly appeared in his pocket, he felt that the money was well spent. There is still half an hour before Kamiyoshi's bodyguards arrive. Let's begin. After silently going through the plan in his mind, Ryudo quietly reached into his pocket and completely turned off his phone. Speaking of which, Colored Glaze looks pretty tied up. Let's take a picture of her first. While talking like a hooligan, Ryudo stood up and walked towards Colored Glaze with his phone in hand. Pa! But before he could get down from the chair and walk a few steps, the phone suddenly fell to the ground. What the hell? My phone is broken. After picking up the phone, Ryudo pretended to press the power button, but the screen was still dark. But this was to be expected. After all, the phone was not turned on. It would be strange if pressing the power button alone would cause a reaction. Yamamoto, come here. So Ryudo sighed and called Yamamoto over and waved at him. Young Master Ryudo, what's wrong? My phone is broken. Give me the phone. I want to take an artistic photo of Colored Glaze. Hurry up and give it to me. Without waiting for Yamamoto to agree, Ryudo roughly reached into his pocket and took out the phone. When the phone was taken away, Yamamoto's expression changed. After all, there were many secrets in the phone. But when he saw that Ryudo just turned on the camera and started taking photos, Yamamoto felt slightly relieved. Here you go. Send these photos to my email in a while. Ryudo casually took a few photos of Colored Glaze sitting on the chair, then handed the phone back to Yamamoto. Of course, when he took the photos, something as fine as a round sticker was already stuck on the back of Yamamoto's phone. Okay, young master, then I will. Immediately mobilize a few thugs. In a while let them put on masks and rush in. Pretend that they want to deal with Colored Glaze. Pretend? Young master, you mean to be a hero and save the damsel in distress. Yes, remember to let those thugs admit that they are from the Heavenly Eye Group. Tion, Heavenly Eye Group? Young Master Ryudo, are you serious? Just like the previous 2 times, Yamamoto showed a clear expression of surprise. Go. After you're done, just squat outside. Take the 2 of them out while you're at it. I need some private space. Yes. After looking at Ryudo one last time, as if he was looking at an idiot, Yamamoto walked out with the 2 men in black. Clang! Just as the door to the warehouse was closed, Ryudo quickly ran to Colored Glaze's side and pulled off the white cloth covering her eyes. Colored Glaze, who had her white cloth pulled off, was obviously very surprised. She curled up slightly and tried to ask as calmly as possible, "What are you trying to do?" Don't say anything. Let's listen to this together. Before Colored Glaze could finish speaking, Ryudo quickly turned on his phone and stuck the other receiver of the hooligan listening device on the back of his phone. Under Lu Li's baffled gaze, not long after, a voice that made one's heart tremble came out of the phone. Yamamoto, is this? What do you have to report? After Yamamoto dialed Heavenly IM's number, their conversation also appeared in Ryudo and Colored Glaze's ears. Chapter 8. Unlike the clear and melodious voice of an ordinary woman, the voice on the phone sounded young, but it gave off a deep feeling. This terrible voice is Tenmu-im? As the young mistress of Kamiyoshi, Colored Glaze obviously knew of Tenmu-im's existence. She had even met her before. Russell, are you this generation's vegetarian king? So cute. Let's get along well in the future. At the time, Colored Glaze was only 7 years old, But that beautiful older sister's smile made her feel numb all over. Especially that voice that sounded like a strange creature in human skin. Colored Glaze would never forget it even after 100 years. But why is Iam's voice on the phone? Could it be? I'm monitoring Yamamoto's report to his real boss. Let's talk after listening. Ryuto immediately explained when he saw Colored Glaze's doubtful gaze. Using the rogue eavesdropping device to eavesdrop on Yamamoto's conversation was the first method that Ryuto thought of. If he told Colored Glaze that someone wanted to deal with her, and that he was innocent, then Colored Glaze definitely wouldn't believe him. But if she heard the conversation between Yamamoto and Iam, it would be difficult for her not to believe him. At the same time, the conversation on the phone continued to play. Iam-sama, there is indeed something important to report. That brat seems to be restless. Oh, restless in what way? He seems to have noticed the existence of the Tenma group, and he asked me to arrange for someone to pretend to be the group's hired thugs to deal with Miss Kanzaki, so that he can act like a hero saving the damsel in distress. Puffed, what a simple and stupid plan. It's very his style. After listening to Yamamoto's report, Iam couldn't help but laugh. But this wasn't the end. Rather, the next part was the main event. Iam-sama, what should I do next? Inform advisor Sakata to find someone to pretend to be an assassin and kill him. Yes, then I won't bother you. Beep. The phone was hung up shortly after, and the warehouse returned to its usual tranquility. No, rather than tranquility, it was more appropriate to describe it as dead silence. After listening to the live broadcast that she had just eavesdropped, Colored Glaze's face changed. How is that possible? Tenmu Iam's behind the scenes? From the beginning, Colored Glaze wasn't that afraid of this kidnapping. Although she was kidnapped, after all, the kidnapper was the person was an idiot. As long as Luli used her brain to stall for time, she would be able to stall for time until her family members arrived. However, if this was planned by Iam, then the meaning behind it was completely different. From the beginning, Tenmu Iam was Kamiyoshi's greatest enemy. It could even be said that they were enemies for dozens of generations. In the hundreds of years from modern times to modern times, Kamiyoshi had been working hard to eliminate the Tenmu clan. After all, this clan that inherited black blood was no longer human, or more accurately, they were becoming less and less human. Therefore, from the moment Kanzaki Colored Glaze gained consciousness, she knew that she had a destined and very terrifying enemy. Milady, do you understand now? Just as Colored Glaze was thinking quickly, Ryuto unwrapped the tape on her hand and asked seriously, understand what? Understand that this wasn't my arrangement from the beginning to the end. I was actually the one who was put into the fire pit. After helping Colored Glaze up from the stool, Ryuto tried his best to make his face less ferocious, and said in a sincere tone. Of course, when Ryuto's ferocious face tried to make a sincere expression, it was more or less laughable, as if he was doing an unsuccessful facial expression. However, although Longdo's facial expression was very funny, Luli knew that he wasn't lying. In fact, that was indeed the case, because on the phone, Iam had clearly said that she wanted Sakata to send someone to kill Ryuto. In this world, anyone could lie, but Iam wouldn't lie. Although that woman was more sinister than a poisonous snake, she would never lie. If she said that she would kill the whole family, she would kill the whole family. Not even a cat would escape. Tenmu Iam was such an honest creature that it made people's scalp tingle. But just as Colored Glaze got out of trouble and stood up to look at the blonde in front of her, there was still a trace of doubt in the eyes of the young lady. The reason for the doubt was very simple, because this Ryuto Kiryu was too smart. Colored Glaze couldn't help but ask, "You actually know that there are people from the Tenmu group in your Rulon group?" I know Sakata. He has been secretly in contact with Tenmu Iam, intending to annex my family's business. At this time, Ryuto said in a "I already knew" tone, but in fact he didn't know anything. Sakata seems to be one of the 3 power consultants of your Rulon group. Yes, he should be the one who wants me dead the most. With my father in prison for a long time, as long as I die, the entire Rulon group will fall into the hands of Tenmu Iam. In fact, now, Ryudo couldn't help but suspect that the imprisonment of the current Rulon group leader, Hitomi Kazuma, was actually done by Sakata, and I am behind the scenes. In other words, Ryudo has long been irreconcilable with Sakata, and only one side can survive. So that's why he has been pretending to be a playboy, but in fact, he is much smarter than he looks. After understanding everything, Colored Glaze's gaze towards Ryudo also changed slightly. After all, before this, Ryudo Kiryu could be said to be a complete hooligan. But based on the current situation, he didn't seem to be that simple. The young master of the Rulon group not only could make a clear judgment of himself and the situation around him, but he could even see through Tenmu Iam's conspiracy. Just this alone was enough to make Colored Glaze look at him in a new light. Of course, if one knew that this was done at the cost of 2 lives, this admiration would probably be reduced by half. Sakata Masamune should send an assassin. Can we leave now? After quickly moving her body, Colored Glaze looked at the door over there. It's probably difficult to leave. There is only one door in this warehouse, and Yamamoto should be secretly monitoring this door. As soon as we go out, we will be killed in advance. Although he has united with Colored Glaze, Ryudo didn't forget that Yamamoto had a gun. If the two of them ran out like this, the result was likely to be the same as last time and Samsara shot dead. But if they continued to wait, once the 3 assassins sent by Sakata arrived, the 2 of them would only be in more danger. I have this thing in my hand, see if you can think of anything. Immediately, Ryudo told Colored Glaze all the details he knew and handed the hooligan taser to her. Chapter 9. Even if Ryudo was a transmigrator, there was one thing that he had to admit. At the end of the day, the current Ryudo was still a level 1, human fragment trash. If it wasn't for the fact that he had a few extra lives, he would be happily feeding the fishes at the bottom of the sea. As for the original female protagonist, Colored Glaze Kanzaki, her intellect was extremely high. Not only did she have a high IQ, but she was also very good at reading people's minds, and knew all sorts of strange knowledge. It could be said that she was both an encyclopedia and a chief of staff. So at this critical moment, Ryudo wanted to see what kind of solution Colored Glaze would come up with. After feeling Ryudo's trust, Colored Glaze nodded and said in a low voice, "Okay, give me 10 seconds. After saying that, she used her slender thumb and index finger to pick up a handful of her soft hair, and began to rub it, as if she was making a fireball. Oh, it's here. Colored Glaze's standard thinking action. Queen's finger. Seeing the girl repeatedly rub her hair with 2 fingers, Ryudo revealed a perverted expression of excitement. Since young, Colored Glaze could not help but do this action when she was deep in thought. In the original work, whenever she did this action, it meant that someone was about to be in big trouble. At the same time, pieces of the puzzle flashed through Colored Glaze's mind. Our advantage: Ryudo Kiryu, 2 black suits that we can mobilize, a taser, and the other party's leaked information. Our disadvantage: the assassin that will come in a few minutes, Yamamoto's pistol. From Colored Glaze's perspective, it was not difficult to get out of this predicament. What they really needed to think about was what would happen after this. Tenmu Iam, I didn't expect you to trick me here. Now prepare to receive my return gift. And this return gift will completely dissolve your control over the Rulon group. When she thought of the figure at the top of the tall Nobunaga building, who seemed to be looking down on everything, Colored Glaze could not help but feel angry. At this moment, her fingers suddenly stopped moving, which meant that Colored Glaze's overall plan had been completed. Ryudo Kiryu battle begins. The girl opened her eyes wide and exuded an imposing aura, as if she was the leader of the Valkyries on the front lines of the war. Ryudo was also intimidated by her aura. He immediately straightened his back and asked, "Yes, what do I need to do? Anyway, let's get some blood." What? Hearing failed. Blood is an important product of the human body. Why did Colored Glaze want Ryudo's blood? I'm sure everyone is familiar with blood. But why do we need blood in this situation? Let's let Yamamoto take everyone to understand. Pa, what's going on? Is there a mosquito buzzing in my ear? Just as Yamamoto leaned against a wall outside the warehouse to smoke, he could not help but reach out and pat his face. The sky was getting dark. A man in a black suit was smoking alone by the beach. The cigarette in his hand was a Marlboro. He only smoked Marlboro, and he only loved one person in his life. This was Yamamoto's life creed. Of course, the person Yamamoto loved was himself, so as long as he could benefit, he never cared about the life and death of others. It should be about time. The killers sent by Sakata-sama will arrive and kill the two guys inside. He looked at the sky and looked at his phone. The time on the phone was exactly 12 o'clock, neat and auspicious. In order to not let his two subordinates get in the way, Yamamoto deliberately moved them to a corner to watch. This way, when the killers arrived, Yamamoto could quietly let the three killers in to complete the task. Hey, help Yamamoto! But just as Yamamoto was smoking and watching the sea to pass the time, the door of the warehouse not far away suddenly opened. With a sharp scream, Ryuto's figure appeared in front of him. What's going on? What kind of trouble was this guy trying to stir up before he died? Usually, cleaning up Ryuto's mess made Yamamoto feel very tired. But after all, the two black-suited subordinates were still not far away. So Yamamoto could only quickly walk to the warehouse to see what the young master wanted to do. However, when he got closer, Yamamoto found that there were obvious bloodstains on Ryuto's body. Blood-stained Ryuto's originally clean high school uniform, combined with the salty sea breeze and the pitch-black night. This extreme Dao young master looked like a psychopathic murderer. So Yamamoto quickly ran over and asked, "Young Master Ryuto? What's going on? Why is there so much blood?" "Sean, Yamamoto. Not good. I killed someone." Perhaps out of fear, Ryuto's body was trembling slightly, and his tone was also quite frightened. "Killed someone? He killed. Could it be?" Yamamoto knew that there were only two people in this warehouse. One was Ryuto Kiryu, and the other was Kanzaki's colored glaze. Since Longdo said that he had killed someone, then the person he had killed was definitely that young miss. Yamamoto hurriedly rushed into the warehouse, and the scene that he saw stunned him. In the dim interior of the warehouse, a slim figure was lying on the ground like a broken doll. The girl was originally very beautiful, but unfortunately, her body was covered in blood. While destroying her original beauty, it also added a strange charm that was like an evil book. Especially when the moonlight shone through the window and onto the girl's body. What was displayed in front of Yamamoto's eyes was a picture of a hellish beauty. "This, Ryuto Kiryu, what did you do?" Seeing this tragic scene and smelling the increasingly pungent air, Yamamoto couldn't help but walk over to Kanzaki's colored glaze on the ground. At this moment, Ryuto's desperate shout came from behind him. I didn't want to kill her. Who told her to resist so fiercely? So that's what happened. What a piece of trash that can't do anything." Glancing at Ryuto Kiryu, who seemed to be wiping his tears, Yamamoto sighed and walked over to Colored Glaze's side. He wanted to see how this young lady had died, and how there was so much blood. After all, this warehouse was rented. Now that it was in such a ghastly state, it would be very troublesome to deal with it. However, just as Yamamoto walked over to Colored Glaze and squatted down, Ryuto's eyes suddenly flashed with killing intent, and he punched the back of Yamamoto's head. Chapter 10. In the dark warehouse, there was a beauty who died miserably in front of him. This kind of scene was already very eye-catching. Not to mention that Yamamoto didn't have much vigilance against the useless young master who was crying behind him. So when Ryuto suddenly attacked him from behind, Yamamoto almost didn't react. Now Ryuto's physical attributes were level 3 physique, professional expert. In other words, his physical ability was at the level of a professional boxer or professional wrestler. Being hit by a professional's heavy punch from the back to the occipital region could cause fatal consequences. But fortunately, although Ryuto was a professional expert, Yamamoto's situation was similar. Yamamoto had been on the streets since he was a teenager, or he lived the life of a hooligan who ate fights for food. Later on, he also specialized in karate. This kind of special experience made his individual combat ability quite strong. He even had a glorious record of sending more than a dozen enemies to the hospital with his bare hands. So, at the last moment when Ryudo's punch was about to hit the vital part, Yamamoto used his survival instinct that was honed from countless fights to slightly turn his head. Bang! It was this turn of his head that made Ryudo's punch not hit the vital part between the neck and the brain, but it hit the side of Yamamoto's face. After the solid punch, Yamamoto's body couldn't help but stagger to the side. At the same time, a broken molar flew out of his mouth along with blood and bloody foam. It had to be said that Ryudo's punch was really strong. If he could really hit the back of the head, Yamamoto would definitely be lying on the ground. But he didn't hit the vital part. Since he didn't hit the vital part, then it's my turn. Yamamoto's reaction was also extremely fast. When he realized that he was ambushed, he leaned to the side. He quickly used his left hand to support his body, while he turned his head to look at Ryudo. At the same time, he put his right hand into his pocket. In Yamamoto's inner pocket was his favorite handgun. At this distance, it was enough to blow up Ryudo's head with a single shot. From the moment Yamamoto was beaten to the point where he quickly reached out to support his body, the other hand began to pull out a gun and turn to aim. This series of actions could be said to be done in one go, very smooth, as if it was an instinctive reaction of the body. From this, it could be seen that Yamamoto was indeed a very elite black suit. He was a pretty good fighter in the Rulon group. When his hand touched the pistol in his clothes, Yamamoto had already seen Ryudo's death. As he pulled out his gun, he shouted, "Ryudo Kiryu." Don't misunderstand. The latter half of the sentence wasn't spoken by Yamamoto. As he spoke, he suddenly became a disciple of the ancient gods and started shouting in the language of the ancient gods. Instead, all the muscles in his body suddenly tensed up. His originally nimble tongue also went out of control as if it was cramping. The words that came out of his mouth naturally became a strange language of the ancient gods. At the same time, an unbearable pain spread through Yamamoto's entire body. This man instinctively wanted to scream, but because of his cramping tongue, he couldn't make a sound. For Yamamoto, who was a member of the extreme path, this wasn't the first time he had experienced such an uncomfortable feeling. Previously, when he was electrocuted by someone with a taser, he had experienced something similar. However, what Yamamoto couldn't understand was who had electrocuted him. After all, Ryudo was right behind him, and there was still some distance between them. It was obvious that he wasn't holding anything in his hands. This taser is his. Just as Yamamoto's body twitched and fell to the ground, Kanzaki's colored glaze corpse suddenly stood up. She stood up. She actually stood up. How could this be? Yamamoto was extremely puzzled as to why the eldest miss, who had already turned cold, was still alive. Furthermore, she was still holding an exquisite electric shock device in her hand. Although the colored glaze was covered in blood, her posture was still as majestic as ever. She was like a queen of blood, who had just returned from hell. Of course, this was not human blood, but the blood of some fresh fish stored in the warehouse. It was all thanks to the slightly dim environment in the warehouse, as well as the fishy smell of seawater wafting all around. Even a veteran like Yamamoto couldn't tell if the blood on the colored glaze was human or fish blood. Trash. When did I say that this is your turn? Sizzle. Before Yamamoto could figure out what had happened, colored glaze had already squatted down and electrocuted him again with the taser. Yamamoto, who was once again electrocuted, twisted on the ground like an electric eel. His muscles spasmed, his face twitched, and his eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. You like being Tenmu Iam's dog so much, don't you? You're always carrying a gun to act cool, aren't you? Is it fun to bring people to kidnap me? Every time Colored Glaze asked a question in a casual tone, she would press the button on the taser. As a result, the hooligan electrocutor that Ryudo spent 500,000 to buy continuously released a moderate amount of electric current, electrocuting Yamamoto to the point that he kept writhing on the ground. It had to be said that this hooligan electric shock device was also amazing. When electrocuted, it would only cause great pain and immobility, but there was no risk of death. This was simply a must-have for traveling and throwing a tantrum. Of course, Ryudo didn't think that colored glaze would be this scary and have such a bad temper. At first, when colored glaze continued to electrocute Yamamoto, as if she was venting, Ryudo was still watching with a smile. When she electrocuted him for the 10th time, Yamamoto's body began to emit a burnt smell, and Ryudo couldn't smile anymore. That is it about time? We have to carry out the next step of the plan. When colored glaze pressed the switch for the 20th time, Ryudo finally couldn't help but remind her. At this time, Yamamoto was already delirious from the continuous electrocution. His eyes were unfocused, his saliva was flowing, and his crotch was wet. Sorry. I seemed to be a little lost in thought, and forgot about the passage of time. When she heard Ryudo's reminder, colored glaze came back to her senses, and then revealed an embarrassed smile. Colored glaze's smile was quite charming, especially after seeing her happy expression when she desperately used the taser to electrocute the man into an eel. This smiling face seemed even more precious. How come I don't remember colored glaze having a sadist side? Forget it. The first step of the plan was successfully completed. Ryudo dragged Yamamoto, who had fallen to the ground, to a corner and hit him. He then took out the pistol that had once killed him from Yamamoto's arms. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. After all, when he held this thing in his hand, the feeling was not ordinary, especially when he personally experienced its power. Chapter 11. Something like a small pistol couldn't be considered a man's romance. It could even be said to be a villain's weapon. Especially Yamamoto's carefully preserved little black pistol. It was simply a classic model for small fries. Whoever held it would be unlucky. However, at this moment, Ryudo felt that this gun for small fries felt very warm in his hand, as if he was holding a hero's holy sword. This feeling, this weight, it's simply so disgusting, I'm going to throw up. Just as Ryudo was immersed in the joy of receiving the best pistol in the warehouse, colored glaze's words interrupted his self-satisfaction. He turned his head with a drooping face and asked, "Miss, is this gun that disgusting?" "Who said it's a gun? I'm talking about the smell of blood on my body, ugh." Because she had to deceive Yamamoto before, colored glaze had no choice but to smear a pile of fish blood on her body. As a miss, colored glaze naturally had a desire for cleanliness. Who could stand the smell of blood on her body? However, what impressed Ryudo was that when she proposed this method, she didn't hesitate at all, and directly poured a basin of stinky fish blood on her body. Colored glaze indeed hated dirty fish blood, but she hated failure even more. Therefore, as long as she could increase the success rate of her plan, this miss would never hesitate to do something she originally didn't want to do. But now that she had taken down Yamamoto, colored glaze couldn't help but feel disgusted by the sticky clothes on her body. This was an instinctive reaction. "Here, take off your jacket and change into this." Seeing colored glaze's disgusted look, Ryudo didn't hesitate to take off his school uniform jacket and handed it over. Ryudo and colored glaze both studied in Takuri First High School, so they both wore uniforms today. Fortunately, it was autumn now, and the school's uniform was a two-piece jacket, so Ryudo didn't have to strip naked. Lioli didn't know how to react when she took over the jacket that was still warm and had a man's scent. If it was before, she would rather continue being the bloodstained queen than wear Ryudo Kiryo's clothes. But when she saw him turn around and walk away after handing her the clothes, colored glaze couldn't help but lose her strong sense of disgust. Accompanied by the rustling sound of clothes rubbing against each other, Lioli threw away the stinky clothes on her body and put on the long-sleeved coat that Longdo handed to her. Colored glaze couldn't help but blush a little when she was surrounded by that masculine scent. But when she arrived in front of Ryudo, the blush on her face disappeared and was replaced by an incomparably calm expression. Although we have completed the first step of our plan, there is still a tough battle ahead, colored glaze said to Ryudo while looking outside the warehouse door. Now that Yamamoto was dealt with, the two of them were in an absolutely safe position. Before the killers arrived, as long as the warehouse door was opened, the two of them could fly anywhere they wanted. However, Colored Glaze obviously didn't want to simply escape. What she wanted was to completely disrupt Eternal Concubine Amami's plan, and let that woman who thought she could control everything behind the scenes suffer a big loss. To achieve this, the key was to completely uproot IM's influence in the Rulon group. That's right, IM's influence in this extreme do organization was not only Yamamoto, but also Sakata. As long as Sakata was still in the position of consultant, the next wave of attacks against Ryudo and Colored Glaze would continue. Only by completely dragging down that traitorous consultant could the two of them be considered to have truly taken down Yongji's arrogance. In order to achieve this goal, Yamamoto alone was not enough. They also needed the 3 killers that were sent. According to the phone call just now, these assassins were obviously sent by Sakata. They were from his faction. If these 3 killers were captured alive, coupled with the recording of Yamamoto and IM in Ryudo's phone, there would be irrefutable evidence. To achieve this, the next step was to prepare for a tough battle, and they had to capture them alive. Clang! Not long after, Ryudo opened the warehouse door and walked out alone. The smelly sea breeze blew on his face, making Ryudo, who was not wearing a jacket and only a thin shirt, feel a little cold. Hey, you two, what is this? But he immediately walked in the direction of the 2 bodyguards in black, and happened to see the 2 watching a video on their phones. The most terrifying thing was that they were watching a video of 2 men wrestling with their arms bare. Wow! Young Master Ryudo? Why are you here? When they were discovered, the 2 bodyguards in black quickly jumped up from the ground. The movements of the 2 were 100% synchronized. It would be a pity not to use a large robot to fight alien creatures. The synchronization rate of these 2 guys was so high, and they were watching wrestling together in the middle of the night. Could it be? After twitching his eyebrows, Ryudo quickly said, "In a while, there will be a few old enemies coming to deal with me. Come back to the warehouse immediately, and prepare to fight back." Old enemies? When they heard such sudden words, the 2 bodyguards in black looked at each other and asked in confusion, "Who wants to fish in troubled waters? Where is Yamamoto? He went to the bathroom because of a stomachache. Let's go back to the warehouse and wait. If anyone comes, beat them to death." Yes. Although they were confused as to why Yamamoto would have a stomachache at this time, Ryudo was the young master of the Rulon group, so the 2 had to obey his orders unconditionally. Therefore, under the valiant and spirited lead of Ryudo, the 2 bodyguards in the warehouse stood on the other side of the warehouse. 2 more men in black suits appeared in the small seaside warehouse. They each held a brick and squatted by the door, ready to attack at any time. Why a brick? The bodyguards in black looked at the heavy object in their hands, and felt that it was not as good as the dagger in their clothes. But since the young master's order was to beat hard, but don't kill, then they could only use the brick, which was not very impressive. In the dim warehouse, the fish cabinet in the middle divided the space into 2. At this time, Colored Glaze and the unconscious Yamamoto were hiding in the deepest part of the room. Ryudo was standing near the warehouse door, waiting for the assassins to come for the 3rd time. Da-da-da-da-da. Not long after, there was a flurry of footsteps from the warehouse door not far away. For Ryudo, who heard the footsteps for the 3rd time, he never felt that the footsteps sounded so pleasant. With an incomparably joyful mood, he slowly leaned his body to the left, put his left hand in front of his eyes, and spread out his 5 fingers. He made a handsome and shinibu pose as a greeting for the 3 assassins. Chapter 12. Boom! It was accompanied by a loud bang that had been heard twice before. The rusty door of the warehouse was kicked open by an uninvited guest. At the same time, 3 killers wearing animal masks rushed in with machetes, crowbars, and taser in their hands. They looked menacing. However, the moment they barged in, they were shocked by what they saw. Because it was late at night, the light in the warehouse was not very good, showing a dim color. About 5 meters in front of the warehouse door, a young man in a thin shirt was covering his eyes with his hands, his fingers spread, and his body moved sideways, making a very strange pose. What's going on? Performance art? When the killers saw Ryuto, who was making a Chinibu pose, the three of them stopped for a second. But they were professionals after all. When they came in, whether the target was eating, taking a dump, having sex, or making a strange pose, they would still do their job. And the most important thing was that professional killers would never talk too much. So the masked man in front with the machete, who once took Ryuto's life, immediately stepped forward. He picked up the machete and wanted to run on the spot. What? It was not that the killer suddenly wanted to put down the machete and become a Buddha, but the target in front of him had a cute little black gun in his hand. How is this possible? Why does this guy have a gun? Suddenly the assassin was stunned. He couldn't believe his eyes. According to the boss's arrangement, they were only here to kill a teenage high school student. These three killers were Southeast Asian stowaways that Sakata kept in captivity, and they didn't even understand Japanese. These stowaways couldn't find a proper job after arriving in Yodo, so they were easily bribed by the Godo. In addition, they had no fixed residence, no household registration, and no other information, so they became Sakata's best pawns. But today, the three of them came out to work as usual, but they didn't expect to encounter the Waterloo of their lives. Why? The target was just a high school student. Why did he have a gun in his hand? Are all high school students in Yodo monsters? Walking on the street with a gun every day? Puff. Just as the leading man with the machete was being pointed at by the black muzzle, two muffled sounds and screams suddenly came from the side. He immediately turned his head and saw two men in black suits jumping out of nowhere with two blood-stained bricks in their hands. The blood on the bricks was blindingly red. The two brothers who fell to the ground had tears streaming down their faces. It's over, it's all over. The machete in the man's hand fell to the ground, and his body limp. What should I do? As soon as he entered the door, two of his teammates were robbed by the other side, and he was even pointed at with a gun. In this situation, it was no longer a question of whether or not he could resist. If he didn't resist, he might be able to die a quicker death. Of course, Long Do did not intend to kill them. After all, they were important witnesses. The two of you tie him up and keep an eye on him. Yes. Under the command of young Master Ryuto, the two men in suits who dropped the bricks walked over and took out the whips they carried with them and began to happily tie them up. Not to mention why the two men had whips on them. Not to mention why the hitmen were tied up in a tortoiseshell shape. In short, when the three assassins were tied up, Long Do could be considered to have retreated with success, and his merit was complete. That's it. It was much easier than I thought, Long Do thought as he tucked the pistol away in his pocket. Originally, according to Ryuto's plan, he might have to fight with the three of them or something. In the end, he relied on a gun, 2 bricks, and 2 men in suits. The 3 hitmen didn't make any waves. The moment they entered the door, they gave up resistance and changed from Southeast Asian to French. Sigh, what a pity. I didn't use my professional level hand-to-hand combat ability effectively. When Colored Glaze also walked out and walked over, Ryuto couldn't help but run his hands through his hair and struck a handsome pose. Speaking of which, Ryuto actually wanted to perform well in front of Colored Glaze and fight the 3 hitmen by himself. But this dangerous suggestion was still rejected by Colored Glaze without hesitation, because Colored Glaze felt that it was too unreliable to rely on him for hand-to-hand combat. What if Ryuto was killed? It was safer to use a gun. Well done. Now we have all the evidence. We can take down your Rulon group's Sakata Gu. Just as Luli walked over, a relaxed smile appeared on her face, as if she had heaved a sigh of relief. But before the young lady finished her sentence, another set of messy footsteps came from outside the door. Found it. The young lady should be here. Hurry up and go in. Even though the door to the warehouse had been closed again, Colored Glaze could still hear the familiar heroic female voice. This voice undoubtedly came from the personal samurai who grew up with her, 16 Nights dancing costume. Dancing Costume was a samurai adopted by the Kanzaki clan, which was the ancient bodyguard. She had been trained as a bodyguard since she was young. She was strong, agile and taciturn. Although Dancing Costume was also a beautiful woman with delicate facial features. Her cold face was currently filled with anxiety. "Please, young lady, please be safe." Not long ago, Dancing Costume had been held up by someone due to some sudden incident, causing her to be unable to keep track of the young lady's whereabouts. In just a short 10 seconds of negligence, Kanzaki-colored glaze was kidnapped. Without a doubt, this was clearly a well-planned kidnapping. That was why Kamiyoshi hurriedly mobilized all the factions in Tokyo to search for Kanzaki, as if they were going to turn the ground upside down. In such a situation, the first to arrive at the warehouse was Colored Glaze's personal samurai, Dancing Costume. She led a small team of highly capable people to find clues, as quickly as possible, and rushed to the warehouse by the sea. In the original game, Dancing Costume kicked a certain important part of Ryudo Kiryu the moment she entered the warehouse. Then, she tied him up with a rope and tossed him into the sea. "Ah, is it that beautiful female bodyguard? But this time, I won't have to be beaten up by her. That's great." Ryudo, who had played the game before, naturally knew of 16 Nights Dancing Costume's existence. However, when he heard this voice, he still maintained a relaxed smile. The reason was simple. Right now, he wasn't the one who kidnapped Colored Glaze. Instead, he was her ally who was assisting her. So, no matter how amazing Dancing Costume was, there was no reason for her to come. Ugh. Crap, I'm suffering from low blood sugar. But just as Colored Glaze was walking towards the door, she suddenly felt dizzy as she hadn't eaten dinner yet. She couldn't help but fall forward. Ryudo, who was in front of her, instinctively caught Colored Glaze and pulled her into his embrace. Asterisk boom. Asterisk at this moment, Dancing Costume kicked open the door. And then, the Kanzaki young lady's personal samurai witnessed this scene. Chapter 13. Dancing Costume might be Colored Glaze's maiden name, but in reality, she treated her like a younger sister. So when Colored Glaze was kidnapped, Dancing Costume was the most nervous and the most agitated, especially after knowing that the person who kidnapped Colored Glaze might be the bastard young master of the Rulon group. Dancing Costume became even more anxious. Because Dancing Costume usually had to protect Colored Glaze, she was also a student of Kyoto First High School, and was classmates with Colored Glaze. All the students of Dooley First High School knew two things clearly. First, Ryudo Kiryu really liked Kanzaki Colored Glaze, and had always coveted her. Second, Ryudo Kiryu was a sinister and cunning bastard who was capable of doing anything. If such a bastard young master kidnapped the beauty he wanted, then it wasn't hard to guess what he would do to Colored Glaze. So Dancing Costume had always been praying that nothing like that would happen. No, please don't. How could the young mistress be taken by that bastard? Boom! Her slender right leg, which was wearing a special leather shoe, kicked out, and the door to the warehouse was sent flying for the umpteenth time. However, in the dim light inside, Dancing Costume saw a scene that almost made her heart stop. The first thing she saw was that man, the man who made Dancing Costume want to cut him into 6 pieces. At this moment, Tongsheng Ryudo was only wearing a thin shirt compared to the weather. His clothes were a bit messy, and in his arms was a familiar figure. Just by looking at the hair and Dancing Costume's hair, she knew who it was. The scariest thing was that the Colored Glaze in Ryudo's arms was wearing a male school uniform that was obviously not the right size. In the shoujo manga that Dancing Costume liked to read, she had seen similar descriptions many times. As long as a woman wore a male uniform that didn't fit, then there was a high chance that something was wrong with her own clothes, such as being torn or dirty. Then, why would Colored Glaze's clothes be torn or dirty? The answer should be self-evident. With this conjecture, coupled with Colored Glaze's drowsy and weak state, it really made people think of the worst possibility. In an instant, Dancing Costume's valiant phoenix eyes narrowed, and then her whole body emitted a hellish killing intent. Kill, 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 kill. I have to kill that guy. I have to kill that guy. No, I can't just kill him. I have to let him suffer all the torture in the world before he dies. Without a doubt, Dancing Dress was infuriated. In fact, she wasn't just infuriated. She was mad. What's worse was that she received the best training from a young age, and her unarmed fighting strength was stronger than Yamamoto. Such a crazy beauty staring at him with murderous eyes. This was definitely not a good feeling. Ryudo naturally felt this surging killing intent, but he didn't seem to react for a while. Wait a minute. Why is Dancing Costume so angry? I didn't do anything. Colored Glaze is still fine. Thinking of this, Ryudo looked down at Colored Glaze in his arms. At this time, Colored Glaze was drowsy because of low blood sugar, and her hands and feet were weak. She was wearing an ill-fitting male uniform, and there were traces of blood flowing on her white thighs under the skirt. Of course, the reason why Colored Glaze was in a bad state was mainly because she didn't eat dinner. She was already slightly hypoglycemic, and hunger at night could cause dizziness at any time. As for the blood on her thighs, it was the fish blood that accidentally dripped all over her body. But even Ryudo had to admit that the current situation was really easy to misunderstand, especially when his identity was the stinky criminal who coveted Miss Colored Glaze and kidnapped her. That miss? Can you get up and say a few words? Just as the murderous aura quickly swept through the warehouse, Ryudo gently shook Colored Glaze in his arms, hoping that she would raise her head and explain. But Colored Glaze was in a dizzy state due to low blood sugar. Although she heard Ryudo's words, she couldn't make a normal reaction. In desperation, Colored Glaze could only weakly reach out her hand, pointed at Ryudo and said, "Dancing Costume, he's not a kidnapper, don't do it." With God as her witness, Colored Glaze really wanted to explain. But halfway through her words, Colored Glaze's dizziness became worse due to the forced words, and she could only gasp for air. However, when she pointed her finger halfway through her sentence, the situation became even worse. "Bastard, you dare to do this to Miss." Hearing Miss' painful gasps and weak fingers, Dancing Costume couldn't imagine what terrible things Ryudo did to her. And at this moment, Dancing Costume's eyes turned slightly, and coincidentally saw the 3 Southeast Asian assassins on the ground that were tied into a tortoiseshell shape with whips. Whips? Tortoiseshell? Could it be? Although he knew Ryudo Kiryu was a scumbag, Dancing Costume didn't expect him to be a pervert who liked this kind of thing. What was even worse was that he used these dirty tricks to torture Miss to this extent. Even if he died 100 trillion times, it wouldn't be enough to atone for his sins. Wait a minute. Is there something wrong with my current situation? When he felt the red murderous intent in Dancing Costume's eyes become thicker, Ryudo hurriedly raised his hands in a French military salute to show that he didn't mean any harm, and at the same time shouted, "Wait! I really didn't do anything. Calm down first. Good chance." Just as Ryudo raised his hands, Dancing Costume's figure suddenly rushed towards him at a speed comparable to a 100 sprinter. The distance between the two sides was at most 3 meters. Dancing Costume's incomparably fast dash almost reached Ryudo in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the right hand with deliberately sharpened fingernails swung like a knife towards Ryudo's eyes. Without a doubt, Dancing Costume had received professional training in actual combat. Instead of using 2 fingers to poke the eyeball, using the fingertips to cut the eyeball was more likely to cause damage. Most importantly, almost everyone would instinctively retreat when faced with this move, and Ryudo was no exception. Shit. When he couldn't help but take 2 steps back, Ryudo knew that he was in big trouble. Because taking advantage of this brief moment of emptiness, Dancing Costume had already taken back the drowsy Colored Glaze. This series of movements was so smooth that it was even better than an action movie. Unfortunately, Ryudo wasn't in the mood to appreciate it. After all, he was about to become a big villain in an action movie who was beaten to a pulp. Chapter 14. Ah! At the same time, 2 screams came from behind. Seeing that Dancing Costume suddenly rushed over to attack Ryudo, the 2 men in black also prepared to rush over. But before they could even take a step, the two unlucky men were knocked down by the Wu warriors, who rushed in from behind. It must be known that Mai Mai didn't come here alone. Behind her were several elite soldiers that had been nurtured by the Kanzaki family. In the short span of 2 seconds, the situation had changed drastically. After Kamiyoshi's elite team of Wu warriors entered, Ryuto, who was originally the master of this warehouse, suddenly lost his 2 men, and the young lady in his arms. And all that was left for him was 16 Knights Dancing Costume's manic gaze, and a powerful kick. Dancing Costume was obviously the type of person who didn't talk much. She preferred to use her hands instead of her mouth. From the moment she took back the colored glaze to the second attack, she almost didn't communicate with Ryuto at all. With a gust of wind, her slender long legs swept from bottom to top toward the center of Ryuto's legs. That's right, that position for men was called the bag of death. As the saying goes, when you hit someone, don't hit their face, and when you kick someone, don't kick their balls. Unless it was some kind of unrestricted fighting master, they wouldn't kick their balls. But if she wanted to cause great pain to the opponent, then kicking in this direction was the right choice. This was obviously what Dancing Costume was thinking. Bastard, you despicable bastard. You actually dared to use your filthy thing to play with the young lady. Accept your punishment. With a strong killing intent, Dancing Costume's kick could be said to be fast and ruthless. Hard bridge hard horse true kung fu combined with the special hard-toed leather shoes. If this kick connected, the result would probably be like an egg being smashed by a hammer. But at the same time, Ryuto twisted his body, raised his left leg, and beautifully blocked this fatal blow. What? When the heel of her foot kicked that incomparably hard shin, Dancing Costume couldn't help but quickly took a step back and slightly frowned. Something was not right. How could this brute of a young master react to this and block it so beautifully? Suddenly, Ryuto didn't pursue, but stood still with his hands outstretched, and at the same time an arrogant smile appeared on his face. I think we need to have a good talk, because you really have a very serious misunderstanding. From Ryuto's point of view, his expression and tone were quite sincere. He really didn't want to continue the misunderstanding with Dancing Costume. But as previously said, Ryuto's original body, no matter how much he smiled, he was very arrogant in his tone. Therefore, in Wu Yi's eyes, these actions and words were a serious provocation to her. I think we need to have a good talk. You are not worthy to fight with me, because you really have a very serious misunderstanding. You don't know your own strength. From Ryuto's tone and attitude. To others, this was probably what he meant. He was simply showing off to the extreme. Although Dancing Costume was a girl, but since she was young, she considered herself as a martial warrior. So naturally she wouldn't allow others to walk all over her. Not to mention, she was already angry, and now he added fuel to the fire. So Dancing Costume took a deep breath and coldly said, I understand. Great, then can we have a good talk? I understand, when dealing with people like you, I have to be calm. It's easier to take your dog life. Although she didn't want to admit it, Dancing Costume also understood that Ryuto was indeed somewhat skilled, and attacking with anger would be easy to expose. So in the next moment, the martial warrior's breath immediately became cold, like an erupting volcano turned into an iceberg. But this wasn't good news for Ryuto, because Dancing Costume in a calm state was obviously more dangerous. When he noticed this, Ryuto could only reveal an arrogant smile. Well, now it seems that no one will believe me no matter how I explain. The only thing I can do now is to hold on until Colored Glaze wakes up, and let her help me explain. After looking around, Ryuto came to this conclusion. Fortunately, Kamiyoshi's people had some morals. When Dancing Costume was about to attack, the other martial warriors didn't seem to have the intention to surround and attack. If it was only 16 Knights Dancing Costume alone, with Ryuto's LV3 physique, professional attribute, it shouldn't be a problem for him to hold on. Of course, what Ryuto didn't know was that the reason why those people didn't attack was actually because the warehouse was too small, and it had nothing to do with morals. If this wasn't a small warehouse, but a large open space, he would be able to enjoy a righteous siege. But even if it was just Dancing Costume alone, It was still not easy to deal with, because this woman was indeed very strong. Just when Ryudo was prepared to take 100 moves if you're a man, the martial warrior also continued to attack. The girl suddenly ran forward, and using a box as a stepping stone, she quickly jumped up and stomped down from above. But Ryudo wasn't easy to deal with. He quickly leaned his body slightly, dodging Dancing Costume's kick, and made her fall behind him. But this wasn't the end. Dancing Costume didn't wait for her foot to hit the ground. His left leg was raised almost at the same time as his body twisted, and his knee slammed into the back of his opponent, who was almost within reach. This series of movements was extremely smooth and natural, like a top dancer's gorgeous dance, as if it was a planned chain of moves. What the hell? This. Although Ryudo had the physical ability of a professional, he wasn't a martial arts master. Before he could react, a heavy blow had already landed on his back. What did it feel like to be hit in the back by a hammer? Ryudo had been hit by people before. He had even been slashed with machetes and shot with guns. But he had never experienced the feeling of being hit by a hammer, and now he finally experienced it. At the moment Dancing Costume's knee hit his back, Ryudo could almost imagine the bones in his back crying, and the huge impact of his internal organs being squeezed and deformed. The huge pressure squeezed Ryudo's internal organs, making him almost unable to breathe. But he couldn't stop to breathe, because as soon as he stopped he would die. Because Dancing Costume behind him didn't hesitate to reach out and wrap around Ryudo's neck. She actually wanted to give him a legendary naked choke. Don't get me wrong, naked choke wasn't a philosophical scene where two naked men were entangled together, but a very cruel killing technique. Chapter 15. Naked twist was also known as blood twist. To put it simply, it was to use the arm to directly wrap around the opponent's neck and choke them to death. Conservatively speaking, with a standard movement, the blood twist could cause the opponent to faint within 10 seconds. If the opponent continued to exert force after fainting, the blood twist could kill the opponent in 10 seconds. It was an excellent technique for traveling and killing people. Therefore, when Long Do sensed the movement behind him, he quickly rushed forward in an attempt to avoid being strangled by the woman behind him. He had indeed done so, but the result was unexpected. The reason for the failure was not that Ryudo was not fast enough, nor was it that Dancing Costume was too fast. But when Ryudo dodged forward, a kamiyoshi, samurai standing in front did not hesitate to kick him in the chest. No way. What happened to the martial arts ethics? What happened to the one-on-one duel? In fact, of course, no one agreed with him. But this was probably the reality. So when he saw the big leather shoe rapidly approaching him, Ryudo could only quickly cross his arms and block the powerful kick. Well done, this way you're going to die. Before Ryudo could recover his breath, accompanied by a cold female voice, a soft whip-like arm tightly wrapped around his neck. For the technique of strangulation, the softer the arm, the tighter the neck, and the easier it was to exert force. And at this time, Dancing Costume was using the naked twist. Her whole body directly attached to the opponent's back, like a poisonous snake using her arm to strangle the enemy. Dancing Costume's slender right arm pressed against Ryudo's neck and tightened inwards. Her left hand clenched her right wrist, and her whole body exerted force. Almost at the moment the strangulation technique was formed, Ryudo only felt his neck tighten. His chest was completely unable to breathe, and at the same time, his vision quickly turned black. This kind of professional assassin technique, Dancing Costume was definitely at the top level. Her naked twist only needed about 5 seconds to make any human unconscious. As long as it was a human, there was no possibility of resisting this kind of attack. At the same time, there was a consensus in the fighting world that is a naked twist formed, is simply impossible to break. I can't die here. It was not easy to pass until now. Suddenly, Long Do struggled frantically, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break free from the woman who was tightly wrapped around him. In this kind of situation where the enemy was behind him, there was no way to cause an effective attack, and there was no way to pull her hand away. What to do? This is... Just as Ryudo frantically struggled, he felt like there was a heavy cylindrical thing in his pants pocket. Don't misunderstand, that cylindrical thing was not that, but a hooligan taser that was one size smaller than a flashlight. Previously, after Colored Glaze used this taser to torture Yamamoto, she returned this thing to Ryudo for him to use against the assassins behind him. The problem was that Ryudo had the blessing of the divine weapon. The pistol, of course, did not intend to use this thing to fight, so this taser was always in his pocket. However, at this critical moment, when Ryudo was about to be strangled, and if he fainted, he would probably be dismembered on the spot, he actually touched this thing. From the time he realized what was in his pocket, Ryudo had at most 2 seconds. After 2 seconds, this young master's vision would completely turn black, and he would lose consciousness under the strangulation. Do you want me to use this? If he used the hooligan taser to shock the dancing costume behind him, then he could indeed break the naked strangulation. After all, this was a high-level weapon above the concept of fighting techniques. However, before Long Do was about to use the taser, he hesitated for a second. From the beginning, he did not intend to attack the dancing costume, let alone use such a hooligan item like the taser. The reason for this was very simple. Because I, Ryudo Kiryu, am a gentleman. Gentleman, a gentleman's gentleman. Warrior, a gentleman's warrior. A true gentleman must be courteous to women. So, how could he use such a hooligan taser on a woman? Considering his identity as a gentleman, Ryudo could not help but hesitate for a full 0.1 seconds. Kacha. After 0.1 seconds, he took out the taser, inserted it into the thigh of the dancing costume behind him, and pressed the switch. Indeed, a gentleman should not use the taser on a woman. If he did, then he was not worthy of being a gentleman. But as long as he could save this 1 million, I, Ryudo Kiryu, don't care about being a gentleman. The electric current quickly flowed, and at the same time, the symbol of Ryudo's gentlemanly name disappeared. Of course, using the Professor Yang's kiss on the dancing costume was not without a price. After all, Ryudo himself was still in a state of intimate contact with her. So the moment he pressed the button, the electric current immediately came out of the hooligan taser and passed through the dancing costume's body to Ryudo's body. Therefore, Ryudo had been slashed by a machete, shot by a gun, and hit by a knee, and now he had the new experience of being electrocuted. ×% hashtag at *** 2113. 5261. For a moment, the two people who were electrocuted began to twitch crazily. The scene was like two gods dancing face to face. Oh no! The captain of the 16 knights got electrocuted. Hurry and separate them. Seeing this scene, the Kamiyoshi, samurai not far away, quickly wanted to separate the two people. But there was no way to directly touch the two people. The samurai could only pick up a wooden stick and hit the taser in Ryudo's hand. Bang! With a loud bang, the hooligan taser that Ryudo spent 200,000 to buy was destroyed. Then the two people's bodies were quickly separated. The dancing costume barely managed to stay on the ground, and Ryudo fell with his arms and legs spread out. He was naked for a few seconds before, and he was electrocuted. It would be strange if he did not faint. It's over, do I have to do it again? When he felt the overflowing murderous intent, Ryudo could not help but smile bitterly. Stop. Everyone stop. Don't touch him. But just at the moment when Ryudo just fainted, a weak voice came from not far away. If Ryudo was still conscious, he would definitely think that this voice was made by the angel who saved him. Unfortunately, now his vision was black, and he once again fell into the dark chaos. Chapter 16. This time, I'm probably done for. The moment Long Do fainted, he knew that there would be a day when he would not wake up normally. After all, he was now in the hands of the Kamiyoshi warriors in dancing costume. He would probably be dismembered and thrown into the sea to feed the fishes. But what made him feel strange was why his garbage system didn't notify him of his resurrection. Detected that the host is on the verge of death. Initiating emergency rescue plan. Spending 1 million to erase the fact of death. Beep 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 beep. Erase successful. Logically speaking, after Ryudo fell, there should have been a series of unpleasant noises, and then $1 million would be deducted from his bank account. But none of this happened. In a murky world of darkness, Ryudo only felt that his body seemed to be moving unsteadily towards a certain place. It was as if he was sitting on a boat that wasn't very stable, and the boat was drifting along the river towards a bottomless abyss. After an unknown amount of time, Ryudo slowly woke up and opened his hazy eyes. Am I back again? As he slowly sat up from the bed, he covered his forehead that was still aching. Normally, after resurrection, he would appear in the previous warehouse and continue to repeat tonight's serial deaths. But reality wasn't like that. The second after he woke up, Ryudo felt that there was a new development. The first thing that entered his nostrils was not the disgusting sea breeze, but the calming scent of lavender. Next, he wasn't lying on the broken chair, but on a soft and warm bed. Where is this? When he completely opened his eyes and looked around, Ryudo couldn't help but be shocked by the room he was in. Tatami mats made of rush grass were spread all around, and on top of it was a 2-leaf sunflower pattern. Not far away, there was a simple wooden lattice door that was light and nimble. Together with the linen window paper, the overall color was very low, and it was very clean and natural. Although the entire room was large, there weren't any exaggerated decorations. There was only a solemn painting of a god on the wall, and a small pot of unknown plants decorating the corner. How to describe it? This was a simple and elegant room, but it was out of the modern era. This was Ryudo's first impression. Although it was already the year 20XX, the room he woke up in didn't seem to have changed from a few hundred years ago. As far as the eye could see, there was not a single household appliance, nor was there a single piece of modern furniture. One could not help but wonder if one had traveled back in time to ancient times. When Ryudo stood up from the bed, he realized that not only was the room changed, but his clothes were also changed. The originally dirty school uniform was changed into loose pajamas, but the pajamas were quite modern. It was actually a standard Western-style pajamas. Young Master Toshi, you're awake. Just when Ryudo scratching his head, a cold voice came from behind him. Who? Ryudo was shocked and quickly turned around. Suddenly, he saw a tall old man with a head full of silver hair, wearing a pure white butler uniform, and a stern face standing in front of him. This old man looked to be at least 60 or 70 years old, but his waist was straight, and his eyes under the glasses emitted a clear sense of sharpness. A strict and serious old butler with an elegant temperament. Most people would have this thought when they saw this old man. However, this wasn't the case. The moment he saw this old butler, Ryudo couldn't help but grit his teeth. It's him. Cat House Bunny Ball. For players who had played the game Red Album 2, no survivors. This old man with a strange name must have left a deep impression on them. This Kamiyoshi's old butler's surname was Cat House Bunny Ball, and his name was Bunny Ball. Listening to the name, it was quite cute and interesting. However, in the game setting, this old man was an absolute cheat, an otherworldly expert. Bunny Ball had been the butler of Kamiyoshi for who knows how many years. He specialized in serving the master of the house, and his strength was unfathomable. According to some descriptions in the game, Bunny Ball should be the descendant of the legendary guardian ninja. His family was responsible for the safety of Kamiyoshi for generations. In fact, Ryudo had always maintained a skeptical attitude towards the descendant of the ninja, but Bunny Ball's strength was indisputable. In the later stages of the game, he even had a famous scene where he single-handedly suppressed dozens of armed international mercenaries. It felt like watching a strange urban fantasy drama. According to Ryudo's current attributes, Bunny Ball must be very close to the level of Level 5, Extreme Superman. Young Master Toshi, do you feel uncomfortable? Just when Ryudo couldn't help but stare at the old butler, he calmly asked. Nothing. Speaking of which, where am I now? This is the Kamiyoshi courtyard. It is also where Miss Colored Glaze lives. Kamiyoshi courtyard? The the place where colored glaze usually lives. In Ryudo's impression, Kamiyoshi did get a suite for colored glaze in the port area of Yodo, to make it convenient for her to study at the first high school. But in other words, this is not the Kamiyoshi courtyard. Why is Bunnyball here? With a puzzled mood, Ryudo continued to ask, "Is Miss okay?" Miss had slight symptoms of hypoglycemia before, but now it's nothing serious. That's good. By the way, did she explain the whole process to you? Ryudo didn't need to ask to know the answer. The reason why he could live until now must be because colored glaze woke up in time to save him. If colored glaze didn't help to explain, a new round of torture would have begun. Hearing this, Bunnyball pushed the flat glasses on the bridge of his nose and replied faintly, "Miss has explained it clearly, so Kamiyoshi decided not to pursue the crime of kidnapping Mississippi. Is that so? That's great." Suddenly, Ryudo also felt deeply relieved. Now that his life was no longer in danger, and Kamiyoshi's pursuit was also lifted, it could be said that he passed the first obstacle after transmigrating. However, what Ryudo didn't expect was that Bunnyball immediately asked another question. "Young Master Tong Sheng, you've previously expressed in many ways that you have feelings for the eldest Mississippi. Is that true?" When he was suddenly asked such a private matter, Ryudo said with some embarrassment, "This indeed." After all, the original owner of this body did publicly spread such a statement before, so Ryudo had nothing to deny. But just as Long Do was about to say that's indeed the case, he saw Bunnyball's left eyebrow twitch. Chapter 17. From a normal person's point of view, this was undoubtedly a normal reaction. However, Ryudo, who had played the game before, knew that Bunkamura's action of raising his left eyebrow was a prelude to his attack. In other words, this old butler might be waiting for Ryudo's answer, and might attack him at any time? Attack? Why would he do that to me? Ah, could it be? Suddenly, Ryudo recalled the awkward question from before. Bunkumaru was the dark guardian of Kamiyoshi. Everything he did was calm like an intricate machine. However, when it came to Kanzaki-colored glaze, this old butler would sometimes lose his composure. Lady-colored glaze is the light in the hearts of us who live in darkness. Every time I see her, I can feel my soul being cleansed. In the game, Bunkumaru had once described the colored glaze in such a way. This description was somewhat religious, which made others feel that Bunkumaru was exaggerating, but it wasn't without reason. Kamiyoshi had always been a very special family. It was said that they were relatives of the royal family, and the one who bore the most responsibility in the family was the Zaiwang of Kamiyoshi. Zaiwang was originally an unmarried princess who represented the royal family as a witch. Her job was to serve Amaterasu Okami, and she was in charge of praying, exorcising, and worshipping. It was the highest rank of witch. However, this rank had been developed continuously since ancient times. The royal family created a special department that was in charge of Shinto, which led to the Kamiyoshi. Thus, in every generation, the Kamiyoshi would be the Zaiwang, and she had the responsibility of communicating with the gods on behalf of the country. For example, the colored glaze's mother was the previous Zaiwang, and her aunt was the current Zaiwang. She was the next Zaiwang. 2 years later, when the colored glaze turned 18, her aunt Kanzaki Seiko would step down and pass the position to the colored glaze. Although Zaiwang could still marry after his abdication, but before and during his term of office, he must be clean in body and mind, and must not involve himself in matters of love. In other words, from the time the colored glaze became the fasting king at the age of 18, until the next fasting king succeeded, she was absolutely not allowed to fall in love, much less lose her virginity. Under such circumstances, Ryudo, who had publicly declared that he liked colored glaze, and had even kidnapped her, was bound to be very conspicuous in Kamiyoshi's eyes. Just as Ryudo paused, Bunkumaru asked, "Indeed what? Go on." When Long Do was faced with the question of whether he liked Lioli or not, he originally wanted to answer yes. But halfway through his words, he suddenly realized that he was courting death, especially in front of this old butler. In Rabbit Ball's heart, Miss-Colored Glaze, the next fast king, was definitely a wholly unsullied and pure existence. If he answered indeed in front of him, Bunkomaru might even make a move on the spot. In fact, Bunkomaru really did intend to make a move. In fact, if it was just Ryuto Kiryo's one-sided liking for Miss, Bunkomaru wouldn't have any reaction. The real problem was that Miss didn't seem to have no feelings for this man. Since she was young, those stinky men who always stared at her were like a pile of unrecyclable garbage in Colored Glaze's eyes. Miss had a noble character, and had never been interested in any man. At most she was polite on the surface, but was actually distant. However, when Colored Glaze returned tonight under the protection of a group of samurai, Bunkomaru discovered that she was wearing a boy's uniform. This uniform was clearly not Colored Glaze's clothes, and the inside of the uniform was embroidered with the words Ryuto Kiryo. Butler Bunkomaru, please help me check if there's anything wrong with Ryuto classmate. After returning to the Kamishiro courtyard, the first thing Colored Glaze said to Bunkomaru was for him to check this delinquent's body. In all fairness, the reason Colored Glaze did this was because she felt that she owed Ryuto. After all, her low blood sugar at a critical moment almost killed him. Although they had just gone through a life and death situation together, Colored Glaze hadn't reached the stage of liking someone so quickly. However, in Rabbit Ball's opinion, this was clearly a sign that Lu Li's heart was stirred, and she had a good impression of this extreme Dao young master. Miss Colored Glaze was actually so intimate with a man, and this man clearly liked her. No, this was too dangerous. A single spark could start a prairie fire. Even if it was only a small spark, for a 16-year-old boy or girl, it could immediately ignite into an evil fire that could destroy everything. Therefore, if Ryuto admitted it, Bunkomaru planned to do something to prevent Miss from having a chance to develop with this boy. Of course, Bunkomaru wouldn't go so far as to kill Ryuto, but he wouldn't let him go safely either. After all, liking Miss wasn't a serious crime. Although it wasn't encouraged, it was understandable. Therefore, Bunkomaru only planned to do a little body modification on this young master's body. It was that simple. Although it was a body modification, it wasn't a big deal. He only knew how to use a long needle used for assassination. He would insert it into a certain acupuncture point on Ryuto's abdomen, and it would be pretty much done. Acupuncture was a mysterious technique from an ancient Eastern country. After inserting the needle into a certain acupuncture point, it would cause the human body to have a natural castration effect. In other words, after the modification, this person wouldn't be able to stand up and could only softly turn into a caterpillar. Are you still perplexed by the excessive energy of an adolescent? Are you still having a headache because of your growing beard? Are you still dissatisfied because your voice isn't sharp enough? With one needle, all your worries disappear. From now on, you don't have to carry a razor every day, and you don't have to stare at the beauties on the street. You can focus all your attention on your studies and work. If Bunkomaru was a salesman, he would definitely enthusiastically promote the benefits of body modification to Ryuto. But in reality, he was only eagerly waiting for Ryuto to say indeed, and didn't want to say anything else. In other words, Ryuto was facing an extremely difficult situation. I remember now, Kamiyoshi didn't want the Colored Glaze to interact with men, so if I said yes, he might just kill me on the spot. Ryuto didn't know that this old butler didn't want to kill him, but only wanted to castrate him. Even though this nothing was absolutely unacceptable to him. A man's blade is 3 feet long, but when it is unsheathed, it will shake the 9 heavens. I haven't even pulled out my sword, and you want to castrate me? You might as well just kill me. Chapter 18. What should I do? I can't expose the fact that I like Colored Glaze in front of him, so I can only fool him. In desperation, Ryuto shrugged and smiled. Indeed, there was, but that was in the past. In the past? What do you mean? It means that I don't plan to pursue Colored Glaze anymore. I just treat her as a friend. When making such an explanation, Ryuto's attitude was very casual. If he was facing other people, he might have been fooled by his words. Unfortunately, the person in front of him was the old ninja, who had seen countless villains and heard countless lies. So that's how it is. Is that so? You already understand. After seeing Bunny Ball nod, Ryudo also showed a relieved smile. However, his smile froze in the next second. Bunny Ball's stern face relaxed slightly, as though he was smiling. He then said, "You're even more outstanding than I imagined. You were actually able to predict my intentions in advance, and then lie to fool me. There are many ways to judge whether a person is telling the truth or lying. The time to answer a conversation, whether there was a pause during the conversation, the tone when speaking, the eyes, and even the heartbeat speed." For Bunny Ball, he could easily see that Ryudo was lying and was trying to fool him. So in his view, Ryudo's little trick could only be described as overconfident. Okay, you're good. Ryudo, who was exposed, also knew what kind of person Bunny Ball was. Since he was exposed, there was no point in pretending anymore. "Then you do like Milady. Like I like her, so what?" From the beginning to the end, Ryudo did like colored glaze. When he played the game before, he liked the first female lead very much. After he came to this world, he met her at the beginning, which was enough to show that they were fated to meet. Although Ryudo didn't plan to confess to colored glaze, admitting his feelings was definitely not something to be ashamed of. However, in the next second, Bunny Ball's aura began to change. "Very good," he said with a slightly cold tone. "You are a man, what a pity." His old but not skinny wrist turned slightly and reached to the side of his waist without leaving a trace. Ready to fight? But if you kill me, how will you explain it to Milady later?" Ryudo immediately took 2 steps back and leaned against the wall as he asked in a pretentious tone. It wasn't that Ryudo couldn't control the muscles on his face squirming to act pretentious, but he had no choice. In a one-on-one situation, there was no way he could survive from Bunny Ball. The only way to walk out of here alive was to use colored glaze's name to persuade him to leave. But Ryudo's words did make sense because colored glaze didn't want him to die. After the previous cooperation, the two of them had become good partners. Colored glaze wanted to use Ryudo's relationship with the Rulon group to cut off Tenmu Iam's wings in advance. As for the dragon fighters, they naturally coveted other people's bodies. Naturally, he wanted to build a good relationship with colored glaze and use her power to completely control the Rulon group. In this situation, it was impossible for colored glaze to let Bunny Ball kill Ryudo, but Bunny Ball shook his head and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, I don't plan to kill you." "Don't plan to kill me? Then what do you plan to do?" "I only plan to," halfway through his words. Just as Long Do was concentrating his attention to listen to what this old butler planned to do, his hand rose up like lightning. At this moment, Bunny Ball's eyes lit up like never before. The speed of his arm was so fast that it was impossible to see clearly. Before Ryudo could react, everything was over. What? This is? He only felt pain in his lower abdomen. His legs went soft, and his dantian below his abdomen made a thump sound, as if something was pierced. Long Do hurriedly reached over, but touched a long, thin needle that was almost transparent. This long needle was at least 10 centimeters long. Half of it was outside, and the other half was in the middle of Ryudo's abdomen. When he was pierced by the needle, he felt something, but the feeling immediately disappeared. What is the meaning of this? Ryudo pulled the long needle out of his abdomen and showed a confused expression. He knew that Bunny Ball was good at using this long needle to assassinate. As long as it pierced a few places, the person would be dead. But Bunny Ball didn't pierce the vital parts, but instead, he pierced the needle in a very strange place. What made Ryudo even more confused was that the old butler immediately bowed and respectfully said, "It is over, please leave." "Leave? Wait, what did you do to me?" When he saw Bunny Ball's cold expression, Ryudo suddenly felt a little nervous. After all, the unknown was always the scariest thing for humans, especially when they were facing a monster that was far stronger than them. But Bunny Ball didn't even bother to answer. Instead, he took out a large paper bag and handed it over. "Here are your items and clothes, please take them." Inside the paper bag were Ryudo's own clothes that had been washed and dried. There was also a familiar pistol and a new taser. Although he took back his things, Ryudo was even more confused. Therefore, he asked in an uncontrollable tone, "What did you do to me? If you don't answer." Click. Ryudo quickly picked up the pistol, loaded it, and pointed it at Bunnyball. "Sorry, this thing is useless against me." But Bunnyball shook his head, as if he was not afraid of Ryudo's threat at all. "You are not afraid of guns, but I am." Ryudo sneered and pointed the gun at his temple. His meaning was clear. If Bunnyball didn't tell him the truth, he would shoot himself in the head. If he died here, he would like to see how Bunnyball would answer to Missy. This guy is serious. Bunnyball frowned slightly when he sensed Long Do's determination to face death. However, he still told him what he had done. The moment Ryudo heard, he was dumbfounded. What the hell? I was castrated." He lowered his head in fear, and looked at his good brother, who had followed him for many years with a look of despair. Looking at Long Do's trembling body, Rabbit Ball could only comfort him. "I'm sorry. I know this is very unfair to you, but after Miss retires from the position of Jaiwang, if you still like her, I will help you." Bang. Before Bunnyball could say, "I will help you recover your function." In this clean and tidy room, there was a gunshot and a splash of blood. Chapter 19. Bunnyball would never have imagined that Ryudo would pull the trigger without any hesitation. Shouldn't a normal person rush to the hospital to see if they could be saved when they encountered such a situation? Why did he suddenly shoot himself in the head? Wasn't this too decisive? He was simply a super unyielding man. Of course, what Bunnyball didn't know was that Ryudo's strength was mostly based on his rebirth. Detected that the host is on the verge of death. Initiating emergency rescue plan. Spending 1 million to erase the fact of death. Beep 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 beep. Erase successful. Suddenly, the voice that sounded like an old horse appeared again, which also represented the rebirth of Dragon Fight. Long Do clearly had a deep resentment towards his rebirth this time. From Ryudo's point of view, Bunnyball was a bully, and it was the type that took advantage of his face. Didn't he like the colored glaze? A gentleman would like a fair lady. This was the way of the world. Indeed, the colored glaze's identity was special, and she couldn't casually fall in love. But just because of this, you want to castrate me? Who could tolerate this bastard? Therefore, when he realized that the situation was not right, Ryudo would rather spend 1 million to be reborn than to be bullied. Very good, Bunnyball and Kamiyoshi. You guys are good. I lost this round, okay? After waking up, Ryudo slowly opened his eyes, and he still smelled the familiar lavender scent. In other words, he was still lying on the soft bed, and he didn't return to the previous warehouse. The rebirth point changed. Although he didn't know the reason, it was certain that Ryudo wouldn't return to that warehouse. This also meant that he could focus all his energy on the battle of wits with Bunnyball. Stinky old man, he's too much. After quickly waking up, Ryudo, who was wrapped in the blanket, couldn't help but curse. In the original game, the rabbit ball in the cat house was a great help to the main character. Ever since it was confirmed that they were going to fight against the Heavenly Eye group, this old butler had saved the main character and the young miss from danger many times. Therefore, from the beginning, Ryudo had a good impression of this old butler. Of course, after that needle, any good feelings she had for him had disappeared. The enmity of ending one's lineage was no less than killing one's parents. Kamiyoshi, apply the rabbit ball to the cat house. I will definitely get back at you. Ryudo gritted his teeth, but he quickly focused his energy on something other than revenge. After all, the most important thing now was not how to take revenge, but how to solve this predicament. He quietly poked his head out of the blanket and glanced at the door. He could vaguely see what was going on outside through the wooden lattice door, but there was no sign of anyone outside. Coincidentally, under Ryudo's bed was a tatami made of rush grass, which was basically a straw mat. He quietly reached out and grabbed the edge of a small straw mat and with the smallest movements, he tore off a few small pieces of grass from the top. Then he stacked the grass pieces together, forming something like a protective gear, and placed it on his lower abdomen. The current Ryudo could still vaguely feel the feeling of being pierced by the long needle not long ago. The location is right here. Done. After stacking the tatami pieces and sticking them on his abdomen with the hoodlum Velcro, Ryudo looked at his lower abdomen that couldn't be seen without careful observation, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. The stacked grass pieces were 2 centimeters thick, and they were also flexible. Even Rabbit Ball's long needle couldn't accurately pierce the acupuncture point after piercing through it. So far, the protective work was done. Next, he had to think about how to teach Rabbit Ball a lesson. When he thought about the emotionless, robot-like old face, Ryudo's eyes were filled with resentment. Chapter 20. He wouldn't be castrated if he took care of his defenses, but that was far from enough. Even if he wasn't a match for Cat House Bunny Maru, he had to regain some of his dignity. Otherwise, the needle from last time would have been too unjust. In this situation, Ryudo thought for a few seconds and revealed a strange smile. I've got it. Let's do it. Although there was a huge difference in strength between them, the enemy was in the light while he was in the dark. It wasn't impossible for him to kill Bunny Maru. Tap, tap, tap. Just like that. Not long after, the sound of light footsteps came from the guest room of the Kamishiro courtyard. Hearing the footsteps, the old man who was leaning against the corner of the door slowly opened his eyes. Oh, he's finally awake. Cat House Bunny Maru looked at the pocket watch in front of his chest. The watch showed that it was 12 o'clock sharp. It was already noon of the second day. I have to deal with this quickly. It would be troublesome if Milady came to check on me. She did come once in the morning. After looking at the time, Bunny Maru walked towards the guest room. Today was a Sunday. Milady didn't go to school. Instead, she was doing her daily training in her room. As the future vegetarian king, the things that Kanzaki-colored glaze needed to learn were far beyond what normal people could imagine. It wasn't something that a student could compare to. When he thought of Milady's figure training so hard to become the vegetarian king, Bunny Maru wanted to cry. In order for Milady to succeed, even if I have to turn into a demon, I won't hesitate. For this, the man in the room had to be eliminated. Voila! Accompanied by the almost inaudible sound of the door being pushed open, Bunny Maru silently walked into the guest room. The man in the guest room seemed to have just woken up. He was admiring the goddess of destiny, hanging on the wall behind him. This was the world's earliest portrait of the goddess of destiny. It was also the god that the entire Kamiyoshi worshipped for thousands of years. But in Ryudo's view, the portrait of the goddess of witches was somewhat abstract. He couldn't even tell that it was a woman. Young Master Toshiro, you're awake. Just then, Bunny Maru's voice interrupted his thoughts about the gender of the portrait. It also announced the official start of the competition. Are you from Kamiyoshi? This is Kamiyoshi's territory? Because he had already experienced it once, Longdo chose to take the initiative this time. Yes, I'm from Cat Bunny Maru. I'm not interested in who you are. Anyway, I'm going to leave now. Where are my things? Before Bunny Ball could finish introducing himself, Longdo casually waved his hand and spoke arrogantly. In any case, you don't dare to kill me. In any case, you won't let me go. So why should I be polite with you? Therefore, Longdo chose to let himself go. Since he was an extreme Dao young master, he should act like one. Bunny 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 Maru. Titi test. In any case, Tu-Wan was a wily old fox who had been through hundreds of battles. If he was angered by such a small trick, he would have died who knows how many times. So the butler said calmly, "Sorry, young Master Toshiro. Before I leave, I want to ask you a question." "Okay, I approve. Young Master Toshiro, you've expressed in many ways that you have feelings for the young lady. Is that true?" "Yes, I like her, and I will marry her in the future." So, in front of Bunny Maru, Ryudo openly admitted his feelings and even said, "I will marry her." "Yes, I want the colored glaze's body." "What? I can't. I want the young lady." "I said it." His sharp eyes stared straight into Bunny Maru's eyes, as if he didn't think there was anything wrong with his words. Such a straightforward and domineering answer surprised Bunny Maru. After all, the fact that Kamiyoshi strictly forbade Saiwang from contacting men was known in Tokyo. So, only a fearless young master like Ryudo dared to publicly express his feelings for the colored glaze. And not only did he dare to publicly express it, but he also dared to come to the Kamiyoshi courtyard to express it in front of Bunny Maru. It had to be said that just this boldness that didn't even put the Kamiyoshi in his eyes was enough to make Bunny Maru admire him. If the young lady didn't have a heavy responsibility, perhaps this young man would have been a good choice. After secretly sighing, Bunny Maru helplessly shook his head and said, "If that's the case, then forgive me for offending you." The last word Sin didn't dissipate in the air, and the old ninja had already made his move. His right hand moved like lightning, and the slender needle had already pierced Ryudo's abdomen. It was as sudden as last time. Even if Ryudo was focused on defending, he still couldn't make any effective reaction. Is this the strength of this world's top masters? Amazing. Before he could react, Ryudo was already hit. Exactly the same as last time. The long needle accurately pierced a certain point in the abdomen and deeply pierced in. Or rather, on the surface, it looked like it was deeply pierced. After all, Ryudo's abdomen was covered with a layer of turf protective gear. The long needle would have been blocked after piercing in, and it wouldn't have pierced this deep. Just like this. Although Ryudo could feel a slight pain in his abdomen, it didn't have the thump like last time. Obviously, the long needle didn't pierce through the acupoint as expected, causing this needle to only give Ryudo a little acupuncture, without any substantial effect. But even so, Ryudo still pretended that his legs were weak and half-kneeled on the ground, showing a painful expression. What's going on? The place where I was pierced seems to have something pierced. What did you do to me? Very good, it's working. Hearing Ryudo's angry and painful howl, Bunkomaru silently nodded. Only those who had their acupoints pierced would know what it felt like. So this young Master Kyoto couldn't be faking it. If there wasn't a rogue system, here are your belongings and clothes, please take them. You can leave now. After successfully helping Ryudo complete the first step of the Sunflower Manual, Bunkomaru still took out the paper bag from somewhere. Inside the paper bag was Ryudo's clean and dry uniform, a familiar pistol, and a new taser. The moment Ryudo took the paper bag, he immediately picked up the pistol and pointed it at Bunkomaru's head without hesitation. Chapter 21. What did you do to me? Longdo picked up his pistol and quickly loaded it before he roared in a tone full of anger. Although he wasn't actually castrated, he wasn't acting either. He was truly angry. After all, he was castrated once before, and he felt extremely aggrieved when he thought about it. But just like last time, Bunkomaru was unmoved by the black muzzle. The number of times Bunkomaru was pointed at was almost the same as the number of times he ate bread, which was an average of once a week. So when he saw the gun, the old ninja was already numb. He just shook his head and said, "Sorry, this thing has no effect on me." Bang! But before Bunnyball could finish speaking, Ryudo pulled the trigger in an instant. This was the second time Ryudo fired a gun in his life, but this time, the muzzle wasn't aimed at himself. If you asked him if he felt guilty for pulling the trigger on a living person, Ryudo's answer would definitely be yes. But if this living person was Bunkomaru, then he definitely wouldn't. The reason was very simple. Even if the distance between the two of them was only 1 meter, this shot would not hit the target. Just as Ryudo pulled the trigger, Bunkomaru's tall figure had already dodged to the side at an even faster speed, and perfectly dodged the bullet. It was the first time Ryudo saw such a miraculous technique. It could only be described as gorgeous. The bullet immediately penetrated the wall and created a visible hole on the neatly decorated wall. The sound of the explosion spread in all directions, allowing people who were far away to hear the commotion. I was careless. I didn't expect him to actually shoot without hesitation. Although he returned the gun to Ryudo, Bunkumaru didn't think he would dare to do so. After all, this was the Kanzaki family's residence. Only an arrogant person would dare to open fire in someone else's home base. So after dodging the shot, Bunkumaru still frowned as he quickly moved in and grabbed the gun. His palm gently grabbed Ryuto's right wrist, and like magic, he confiscated the gun in his hand. Snatching a gun with his bare hands. This kind of superb technique was as simple as eating beans to Rabbit Ball. After all, he ate beans every day. Looks like you're in an irrational state. It's still too early to return this thing to you. That was what Bunny Ball said when he took back the pistol. Of course, the danger he was referring to was not the danger to himself, but the danger to others. After all, there were many other staff members in this Shindai courtyard. If he fired, the gunshot would definitely attract other people. It might even attract the attention of the young mistress. If Ryuto was still holding the gun at this time, it would be troublesome. However, even though the pistol was taken away, Ryuto's expression remained unchanged. He knew that he would not be able to keep his pistol in front of this old monster. Unfortunately, when Ryuto fired that shot, he had already achieved his goal. Da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. At the same time, faint footsteps could be heard coming from outside the guest room. This was to be expected. After all, if a gunshot suddenly rang out from the Kanzai courtyard, the servants and guards in the surroundings would inevitably gather here. Before the crowd gathers, I'll ask one last time. What did you just do? If you don't answer, I'll insert the needle here. After noticing that the crowd was gathering here, Ryuto pointed the needle he pulled out from his lower abdomen at his throat, and asked in a tone, as if he was facing death. What he was doing now was very simple. It was a scam. I have the needle used by your cat house. This is your exclusive weapon. If I use the needle to stab myself in the neck, what will the other people who come in, and even Kanzaki and Colored Glaze think? At that time, Bunny Ball would probably fall into his pants, and wouldn't be able to wash it clean. In other words, what Ryuto used to blackmail Bunny Ball was actually Colored Glaze's trust in him. Colored Glaze handed someone over to you to take care of, but you took care of her to the point of having a needle in your neck. Will Colored Glaze still dare to trust you in the future? Although with Bunny Ball's status, Kamiyoshi wouldn't punish him because of this. But from now on, Colored Glaze wouldn't be nice to this old butler, who was originally very respectful. To be hated to the extreme by the lady who worshipped him like a god, this was a punishment worse than death for Bunny Ball. So he immediately raised his hand to signal Ryuto to calm down, and said with an obviously emotional tone, "Wait, don't be impulsive. Let's talk things over." But Ryuto ignored him and started counting down. 3, 2, I'll talk. Actually, I made you lose part of your male function, but it can be recovered, so don't worry. Helplessly, Bunny Ball could only slowly tell the truth. Don't go crazy, please don't go crazy. Bunny Ball explained while focusing all his attention on Ryuto's hand. Bunny Ball was rarely afraid of someone in his life, but now he was really afraid. He was really afraid that Ryuto, this madman, would stab him in the neck. There were many scoundrels who pointed their weapons at others to threaten them. But it wasn't common for a madman to point his weapon at himself to threaten others. This was completely out of the ordinary. How could others respond? The worst thing was that Bunny Ball was really afraid that he would do this. Originally, Bunny Ball's plan was quite simple. It was to gently stab Ryuto, and then kick him out. Even if Ryuto found out that he couldn't get hard for some reason, it would be a long time later. Bunny Ball naturally didn't need to worry about the lady blaming him. But now it was different. After Ryuto was injected with the needle, he did all sorts of unexpected actions like a madman, which made Bunny Ball feel unprepared. There were only 2 people in the room, and the needle was his. If Ryuto really pierced his neck, Bunny Ball wouldn't be able to get away with it. No matter what, Ryuto couldn't die here. He couldn't die under Bunny Ball's needle. Otherwise, his reputation as the guardian ninja would be ruined in an instant. But after hearing Bunny Ball's explanation, this young master sneered. It can be recovered, so I'll let it go? Then wouldn't I have been injected with 2 needles for nothing? Is this guy planning to extort me? The hidden meaning in Ryudo's words was naturally understood by someone as experienced as Bunny Ball. I can't let it go for nothing, but you have to give me some benefits as compensation. Bunny Ball took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. Just say it. What do you want? I want you to do me a favor. This favor doesn't go against justice or morals, but you'll definitely get it when I ask you to come. Just as Ryudo made this request, a familiar voice came from outside the room. Bunny Ball? What's going on? Why are there gunshots inside? Amidst the chaos, Kamiyoshi's lady, Kanzaki-colored Glaze's voice was like the sound of nature. Of course, to Bunny Ball, this voice really gave him a headache. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.